Chapter 74. As Yang Fan pondered, his gaze landed on a thicket in front of him. There was an archer hidden there. This was what Yang Fan had seen. The problem was, since the other party had already begun to suspect that the assassin or the assassin's accomplices were in the Yang residence, and had strengthened the supervision of the internal personnel, then would they be completely aware of the archer's arrangement? Although the Yang residence was large, with the hunting range of the archers, the 30 people did not need to be too spread out. At least 2 archers could be arranged in each area. Huang Qilin was sitting there drinking wine and eating meat, obviously using himself as bait. Then, could there be a 3rd archer in this position? Yang Fan had already made up his mind. He smiled at Duan Wei Feng and said softly, "Brother Duan, I'm going to relieve myself." "Wait, I'm going too." Duan Wei Feng, who was standing there like a javelin, hurriedly chased after him. However, Yang Fan did not rush to the toilet, but went around to the left of the pavilion behind a thicket of flowers and trees. This pavilion was surrounded by vegetation on 3 sides, and on one side was a small gravel path. He walked boldly to one side and began to take off his robe. Hua Shaoqian looked back and scolded, "What are you doing?" Yang Fan turned back and said, "I'm going to relieve myself." Hua Shaoqian said angrily, "Do you think this is your vegetable garden? Don't you know where the toilet is? Do you think you can relieve yourself here?" After being scolded, Yang Fan awkwardly fastened his pants and walked away dejectedly. Hua Shaoqian turned to Huang Qilin and said, "The residents should not have used these people at all. They are all a bunch of useless trash, country bumpkins who have never seen the world. They don't know any rules." Huang Qilin smiled and said, "It's always good to have more eyes and ears. Unless the assassin knows how to make himself invisible, these people will at least be of some use." Yang Fan walked towards the toilet, and the keeper, called Duan Wei Feng, quickly followed. Yang Fan turned his head and smiled. "Brother Duan is going to relieve yourself too?" Duan Wei Feng still had a serious expression on his face. "Let's take care of each other. That assassin might come at any time." After entering the latrine, Yang Fan pretended to relieve himself as his thoughts raced. There was no one hiding in the bushes he had walked towards. The archer he had seen was hiding on the right side of the gazebo, where he had a wide field of vision and could cover 3 directions. If there was a 2nd archer, since he was not hiding on the left side, the only possibility was that he was hiding in the bushes behind the gazebo. They could no longer probe in this direction. Now that they were suspicious of the people inside, it would not be appropriate to use the method of attrition. If they chased Marquis Wu and the workshop attendants out, or sent Yang Mingxing somewhere else, it would certainly make things more difficult for them. The only thing he could do now was to end the battle as soon as possible. But if they ended the battle quickly, would they be able to dig out the real mastermind behind the scenes? Putting pressure step by step would make it easier for the mastermind behind the scenes to reveal himself. Yang Fan could not make up his mind. He could not help but think of what Tin Ano had said to him. Think thrice before you act when encountering a problem. Some things cannot be solved with knives and swords. Use your brain more, and perhaps things will be solved. Yang Fan sighed softly. How could the matter before him be solved just by using his brain? To lure the snake out of its hole, to lure the snake out, Yang Fan secretly made a decision. Leaving Yang Mingxing alone was enough. He would first get rid of Kai Dongqing and his men. Only Yang Mingxing would be left alone. He would definitely take the initiative to ask for help from the mastermind behind the scenes. Or, just as he was thinking, Duan Wei Feng's impatient voice came from outside. "Yang Fan, are you done?" "Yes, I'm done." Yang Fan grinned as he walked out. He rubbed his stomach and said, "Brother Duan, is it inconvenient for you?" Duan Wei Feng suppressed his disgust and glanced at him before turning to leave. Yang Fan grinned as he followed behind him. His gaze fell on Duan Wei Feng's saber. The saber was swinging back and forth at Duan Wei Feng's waist. It was a standard steel saber that was exactly the same as his own. When the two of them returned to the gazebo, there was only a pile of chicken bones left in front of Huang Qilin. He stood up with a burp and said, "I'm going to relieve myself, too." Hua Xiaoqian and Justice Wang Wu-lv stood up at the same time and said, "We will go with you." Good chance. Yang Fan naturally would not miss such a good opportunity. Although the change in position of the few people in front of him was only for a moment, it was enough for him to grasp it. Yang Fan suddenly cried out in surprise and slashed the back of Duan Weifeng's head with his palm. At the same time, he leaped forward. Duan Weifeng fell to the ground. Huang Qilin raised his head and saw that Yang Fan had knocked Duan Weifeng unconscious with one palm. A look of surprise flashed across his face before he saw Yang Fan leaping towards him. He could not help but be shocked and immediately reached out to pull out his saber. Just as he pulled out his saber, Yang Fan had already arrived. He used all his strength with the saber in his hand and pierced through Huang Qilin's chest. With a flick of his wrist, his 5 fingers moved like a pipa and slashed towards Wang Wu-lv's throat. End the battle quickly. If he failed, Yang Fan was not afraid of exposing his identity. His identity as a workshop attendant was originally chosen to investigate the whereabouts of his enemy. Since the enemy's tracks were already clear, it did not matter anymore. Of course, if he continued to use this identity as a cover, it would be of great help to him. If he had no other choice, he would not be willing to expose himself. Wang Wu-lv fell to the ground. At the same time, Huang Qilin pulled back his saber and struck backwards with his left elbow. His body flipped to the side. These few movements were done in one go and were as fast as lightning. Although Huang Qilin was fat, his body was abnormally agile. He turned and moved, attacking and defending at the same time. In a short while, he had changed his body a few times, but when he retreated to the side of the stone railing and stood still, his strength was exhausted. His stomach had been pierced by a saber and slashed out diagonally. There was a large wound, and his intestines were dragged on the ground for who knows how far. Under the dark shadows, he could not see the blood that was flowing out, but he knew that the faint black thing that was flowing out was his blood. So, a sharp arrow was shot out from the flowering shrubs behind the pavilion. As expected, there was an archer lying in ambush here. This archer's reaction was indeed fast, but in the small pavilion, Yang Fan's figure was constantly moving. He swept horizontally to assassinate Huang Qilin. With one hand on the stone platform, he crushed Wang Wu-lv's throat with the other and rolled to the side. He had done everything in one go, and in the small pavilion, Huang Qilin was leaning against the railing. Wang Wu-lv and Hua Xiaoqian were also standing. This meant that there was a meat screen in 3 possible directions where the archer could be lying in ambush. The archer's reaction could not be said to be slow. Moreover, he had seized the gap between the few people standing and quickly shot an arrow. But it was not easy to hit Yang Fan. Yang Fan killed Huang Qilin and Wang Wuliu with a wave of his hand. Then he rushed into the flower bed, and a scream rang out from the flower bed. Yang Fan crashed into another flower bed on the other side, followed by another scream. Once an archer was closed in, he could only wait to be slaughtered. Hua Xiaoqian stood there like a wooden chicken. His body was cold, and his teeth were chattering. Everything had happened too suddenly and too fast. He had never thought that the assassin was in the mansion and right beside him. It was that simple and honest-looking Yang Fan. "Quick!" Hua Xiaoqian had only shouted one word. Before the word come left his mouth, his eyes bulged out of their sockets. At this time, Yang Fan was standing up from behind the shrubs, holding a large bough in his hand. This was a white birch bough, a standard Tang bough. The wood of the bough and the birch bark used for decoration were all of excellent quality. When the bough was not fully stretched, it was more than 1. 6 meters long, almost 1. 7 meters. It was not much shorter than Yang Fan's body. The bowstring was vibrating so fast that it was almost invisible to the naked eye. Under the illumination of the lights in the pavilion, One could only vaguely see a halo of light where the bowstring was. Hua Xiaoqian slowly lowered his head and saw that there was an arrow stuck in his heart. The sharp arrow that could penetrate 5 layers of armor was deeply embedded in his heart. The triangular arrowhead hooked onto his heart. 6 blood grooves pumped out powerful blood from his heart and shot out from the wound. Hua Xiaoqian blankly raised his head. His eyes were unfocused. The corner of his mouth twitched. His knees gave way, and he sat back down on the stone bench. Yang Fan quickly flashed over and cut off Huang Qilin's head. Then he quickly took the knife from Hua Xiaoqian's ribs and stuffed his own bloody knife into Hua Xiaoqian's hands. Hua Xiaoqian sat there, a faint layer of light moving in his eyes, but it was reflected by the light. If you looked for yourself, you would see that his eyes were completely lifeless. Voices rose up from all directions, shouting incessantly, one by one. Figures flew over from all directions. Yang Fan immediately flew back and fell beside Duan Weifeng. Almost at the same time, the first group of people arrived. They saw that the lantern hanging under the pavilion was gently swaying in the wind. Huang Qilin had fallen face up on the railing. Half of his body was outside the railing. There was no head on his chest. The lower part of his body hung limply inside the railing. His abdomen was a bloody mess. Wang Wuliu was lying on his side on the ground, motionless. Hua Xiaoqian sat in front of the stone table in a daze. It was as if he had been scared silly. He ignored all the people surrounding him. But if one looked carefully at his chest, they would draw in a cold breath. A sharp arrow had pierced deeply into his body. His body was slightly leaning forward. The reason he did not fall was because the arrow was pressed against the stone table. Everyone looked at each other. No one dared to speak. The lanterns and torches burned quietly. Occasionally, there would be a crackling sound. Among the people who had arrived in time, Wu Xiaodong's position was naturally the highest. Wu Xiaodong had a sharp chin and a protruding forehead. His cheeks were slightly sunken. He looked thin, but with a pair of sword-like eyebrows he looked very heroic. He slowly walked towards Huang Qilin and reached out to help him up, but in the end he withdrew his hand. He took a deep breath and suddenly turned around. He sternly asked, "Just now, who was the first to arrive?" Chapter 75. A worker, next to Ma Qiao, stepped forward. His shoulders did not shake and his body did not move. He had a standard military posture, but no one paid much attention to him. "Wu Beisheng, we arrived first. Tell me, what did you see?" At that time, we just came out from behind the flowering shrubs. Ma Qiao walked in front of me, so the worker lowered his head in shame. "What I saw was what you saw." Wu Xiaodong looked at Ma Qiao again, his eyes like arrows. Ma Qiao's face was as pale as paper. He trembled like a leaf in the wind. It seemed that the bloody scene had scared him so much that he had not yet recovered from the shock. He looked at Wu Xiaodong, but his eyes were blank, as if he did not see anything. Wu Xiaodong scolded, "You cowardly thing, speak!" "Ah!" Ma Qiao trembled in shock. He said incoherently, "I don't know, I didn't see anything." "No, I actually didn't see." Wu Xiaodong was furious. He dashed in front of him, grabbed his collar, and lifted him up to his tiptoes. He roared, "Speak! What did you see?" Ma Qiao was completely awake. He shrunk his neck, his eyes darting around, and his voice trembled like a quail. This lowly one seemed to have saw a black shadow flash into the bushes over there and disappear. Then I saw everyone in the pavilion die. This lowly one doesn't know if my eyes were playing tricks on me or if I really saw it. Wu Xiaodong stared at him for a long time. He let go of his hand. At this time, someone came forward to check the 2 unconscious people on the ground. He shouted, "Wu Beisheng, they are still alive. They are just unconscious." Wu Xiaodong waved his hand and shouted, "Wake them up!" The hall was as bright as day. Yang Mingsheng, with his face covered with a white cloth, sat in the master's seat. Kai Dongqing and Wu Xiaodong sat on his left and right. Yang Fan and Duan Weifeng stood in front of them. Kai Dongqing said amiably, "Don't be afraid. Tell me what happened." Yang Fan seemed to have never experienced such a big scene before, so he was a little frightened. He nervously picked at his fingernails and said, "General, I didn't see anything. I just felt wind at the back of my head, and then my vision went black and I fainted. When I woke up again, I was already here." Kai Dongqing did not say anything, and turned his gaze towards Duan Weifeng. Duan Weifeng's face turned red and said awkwardly, "It's the same for you." At that time, I only heard him cry out in alarm, and his body fell forward. Then I also suffered a fierce blow to the back of my head, and then I fainted, and when you woke up. Duan Weifeng's face turned red, but Kai Dongqing's face darkened. He slowly stood up, clasped his hands behind his back, and paced back and forth. After pacing for a long time, he impatiently waved his hand, and someone brought Duan Weifeng and Yang Fan away. "Young master." Wu Xiaodong stood up and cupped his fists. "Here," Kai Dongqing said solemnly, "from now on, do not leave my side for even a moment." Wu Xiaodong knew that Lang Jiang was thinking of his safety. His heart warmed, and he immediately replied, "Yes." Kai Dongqing suddenly looked at Yang Mingxing, and in his eyes there was a hidden rage. He hatefully said, "Yang Langzhong, because of you, I have already lost 3 generals." Yang Mingxing gave a strange smile and gloomily said, "What does this have to do with me?" Kai Langjiang, "What happened that year? You and I both had a part in it." Kai Dongqing flicked his sleeves and left, and cursed from afar. "This kind of trash! What's the point of living?" Yang Mingxing heard it and slowly raised his head. His 2 black nostrils seemed to be sniffing the air and hoarsely said, "Who said I have no joy in living? I want to know who he is. I want to know, will you be able to kill him, or will he be able to kill you? I will definitely know, I will definitely know." Kai Dongqing left Yang Mingxing's bedroom and said to Wu Xiaodong, "Being led by the nose like this is not a good strategy. It is easy to dodge a spear in the open, but difficult to guard against a stab in the dark. Tomorrow morning, we will withdraw all our men." Wu Xiaodong said, "Lang Jiang, are we not going to avenge our brothers?" Kai Dongqing said, "Of course we will, but not here in our territory." He coldly glanced at Yang Mingxing's bedroom and coldly said, "Since that assassin already knows that I am also his enemy, will he let me go? I was careless and underestimated him. That's why I acted like I was possessed and only wanted to use Yang Mingxing as bait. Little did I know that I am also the assassin's target. Since that's the case, why should I stay here? I want to see if he still dares to come to the military camp." The atmosphere in Yang Langzhong's residence was unprecedentedly tense, and the wind howled in all directions. The first 2 times, the assassin only killed important people, and the ordinary Marquis Wu's workshop workers were nervous, but not especially afraid. But this time the assassin went on a killing spree, and those who died were not only the generals, but also the officials from the Ministry of Justice and the Yang family's guards. For a moment, everyone was in danger. No one knew who the murderer was. No one knew his identity, no one knew where he came from, and no one knew his motive. To be able to come and go without a trace in the heavily guarded Yang residence, this kind of ability was simply unimaginable. Hence, everyone looked at Wu Xiaodong with a strange gaze, as if they were looking at a dead man. But at least tonight, everyone could be more at ease, because someone had died tonight. That assassin was like a sword that would not return to its sheath until it saw blood. Tonight, he had drunk his fill of blood, and it was probably time for him to return to his sheath and rest. But the sword did not return to its sheath. Yang Fan and Duan Weifeng were knocked unconscious, and although it was not fatal, they still had a splitting headache. Tonight's patrol mission could only be handed over to the other 2, and they went back to rest. Duan Weifeng and the other new batch of so-called workshop workers because they arrived late, had to find another place to stay. Ma Chiao accompanied Yang Fan back to the woodshed, gave him some water, watched him rest, and then continued to patrol. In the fourth watch period, Yang Fan's drunkenness suddenly stopped, and he quietly sat up. His usual habit was to leave immediately after he succeeded, and look for another opportunity. But this time he had to do it earlier. Yang Mingxing had already suspected that there might be someone in the inner circle who was in cahoots with the assassin. His situation was getting worse by the day, and at the same time the successful assassinations made the security even tighter. It would not be easy to sneak and attack again, and if the other party changed their residence, it would be even more difficult. Taking action now, firstly, was to catch them off guard, and secondly, was forced by the situation. There was a tree at the door, and in the tree there was a nest, and in the nest there were clothes. Green clothes, green headgear, short knife, short sword, and tiger boots were all wrapped up well in oilcloth. When Yang Fan changed them one by one, and then put on the exorcism ghost mask, he looked like a different person. This time he wanted to fight head-on. Yang Fan lay on the cornice, like a sculpture of an evil, repelling ridge beast. He had been lying on the cornice for close to 2 hours. Lights flickered and human figures moved. Although the assassin had already come tonight, and according to common sense, tonight should be safe, but after the enemy's bait was ineffective and the defense shrank, it was obvious that the defense had become stricter. This was within Yang Fan's expectations. He didn't expect to be able to kill the enemy by surprise. Tonight, he was going to go on a killing spree. Yang Fan slowly unsheathed his short sword. The starlight filled the sky and reflected on the blade, flashing a strange light. Yang Fan was about to pounce when 2 patrolling guards, holding torches, suddenly came out from the corner of the wall. Yang Fan lay down again, because one of the 2 was Ma Chiao. Fortunately, they did not stay there for long and quickly left. Yang Fan knew that Ma Chiao still had another 2 hours before his shift would be over, and he would need at least the time of 3 incense sticks to burn to make 1 round. Yang Fan waited quietly, and when he estimated that Ma Chiao had already gone far away, another 2 patrolling guards came out from the corner of the wall. Yang Fan's legs bounced off the ground, and he floated down to the ground. There were 2 patrolling guards, and there were 2 fixed sentries in the same place and 2 archers in the grass. The archers were hidden, but Yang Fan had been lying in ambush on the cornice for 2 hours. So how could they not move at all? Therefore, Yang Fan knew each person's position like the back of his hand. The first thing Yang Fan had to deal with was the archers, and the biggest threat to him was undoubtedly these 2 people. The arrows were fast, and it was night time, so he was not confident that he could avoid them. The 2 patrolling guards walked over, and Yang Fan suddenly landed on the ground. He swept past the 2 patrolling guards like a black shadow, and directly pounced on an archer hidden in the grass. The archer could only be slaughtered when the assassin got close to him. Yang Fan did not stop for a moment. With a wave of his sword and a kick, the archer's body was ruthlessly smashed into another corner where the other archers were hiding. Then he pounced forward. At this moment, the 2 night patrollers he passed by fell to the ground with their hands on their throats. "The assassin is here!" The 2 sentries standing at the door shouted. The moment they unsheathed their swords, Yang Fan had already finished off the second archer and pounced on them. "Good thief, you dare come again? Let's see where you can run now." Wu Xiaodong had been sleeping with his clothes on, and when he heard the noise, he immediately appeared at the door. When he saw Yang Fan, who was wearing green clothes and a green headgear, his eyes turned red, and he drew his sword and rushed forward. The wind whistled, and Wu Xiaodong's figure arrived as he shouted. The sword in his hand slashed out a dozen times in an instant, and halos seemed to appear around Yang Fan's body. Wu Xiaodong's attack could be said to be unusually fierce. Yang Fan was still able to deal with the combined attack of 2 guards and a fully prepared bull. His short sword was like lightning, and one of the guards spun and screamed as he fell. Yang Fan leaped forward. His dagger tapped on another Imperial bodyguard saber. His body crouched down and sprang up. The saber in his boot was already in his palm. with a diagonal upward thrust toward Wu Xiaodong's throat. Kill! Suddenly, there was a flash of light from the sword. Although Yang Fan's sword could take Wu Xiaodong's life, his own arm would definitely be chopped off. Yang Fan withdrew his sword in time and turned his body to dodge. As he leapt backwards, he held the hilt of his sword in a reverse grip and stabbed out. The other guard cried out in pain and fell backwards, dead. As soon as Yang Fan's feet landed on the ground, the two swords whistled through the air and chopped towards him at the same time. The palace commander Kai Dongqing arrived, and together with the fully prepared bull Wu Xiaodong, they fought Yang Fan together. Chapter 76. The sound of clappers, gongs, and drums filled the air, and the sentries hidden everywhere in the Yang mansion gathered here one after another. The archers knocked their arrows and aimed at the three people who were fighting like lanterns, but did not dare to shoot. The speed at which the three people changed positions was too fast, and their eyesight could not keep up. If they shot an arrow, it was hard to tell who it would hit. As soon as Kai Dongqing and Wu Xiaodong exchanged blows with Yang Fan, they found out that this person's martial arts were very high. An inch shorter, an inch more dangerous. Yang Fan's hands were full of daggers and daggers, tightly entangled with them, attacking their vital points. They also wanted to retreat and let the archers shoot Yang Fan like a hedgehog, but Yang Fan was very tight and they could not escape. If they retreated now, they would be stabbed by Yang Fan, so they could only constantly change their positions and attack fiercely with their daggers. On the surface, the two daggers whistled through the air, as if the assassin was completely enveloped in their attacks. But in reality, they knew that they were suffering. They wanted to escape, but they did not have the strength to do so. However, the surrounding guards could not tell what was going on. They all thought that the two generals had gained the upper hand, so they just tightly guarded the doors to prevent the assassin from escaping. Yang Fan was entangled with the two people, and his body gradually shrank under the flashing daggers, as if he was about to be chopped into pieces by the two sharp 1,000-bull sabers. Suddenly, Yang Fan laughed, and his short sword suddenly burst out with a brilliance that was even more brilliant than Kai Dongqing's 1,000-bull saber. His dagger was tighter and tighter, and with every step he took, it was impossible to tell how many times he stabbed. Kai Dongqing was retreating, and with every step the dagger in his hand danced like a wheel of light, desperately resisting Yang Fan's crazy counterattack. Behind them, Wu Xiaodong's body swayed a little, and he suddenly stabbed his saber into the ground to support his body. A dagger was stabbed into his chest, all the way to the hilt. At the critical moment, Yang Fan let go of the dagger in his hand and let it fly out, directly piercing his heart and severing his arteries and veins. Yang Fan was very clear that Wu Xiaodong didn't have long to live. That's why he gathered all his strength to capture Kai Dongqing. He didn't dare to be negligent in the slightest. As long as Kai Dongqing broke away from the battle, he would be in danger. The situation took a turn for the worse, and everyone became nervous. All the archers drew their bowstrings and pointed their arrowheads forward, following the movements of the two figures, but they did not dare to shoot the arrow. The Xiaozhou murder case, 147 lives. Die, you bastard! In the midst of the fierce battle, Yang Fan suddenly roared out these words like a spring thunder. Everyone was guessing his intention, and everyone was guessing the assassin's goal. Today he publicly fought and also publicly announced his reason for appearing here. He was seeking justice for all the elders of the Peach Blossom Village, for his parents, and for his elder sister. As soon as the word came out, Yang Fan suddenly leaped backward. Their figures suddenly separated, but Kai Dongqing was still wielding his saber and quickly retreated. He retreated 3 steps in a row, and only then was he able to catch his breath. Under the illumination of the lanterns and torches, cries of alarm could be heard. Kai Dongqing's body was covered with blood, and the blood was gurgling out. In an instant his robe was dyed red. No one knew how many times he had been stabbed by Yang Fan in that instant. Yang Fan's figure rapidly retreated until he reached Wu Xiaodong's side. Wu Xiaodong was already dead, but his stiff body was still leaning on the steel saber. Yang Fan leaped up like a hare and landed on the ground, and in a flash he arrived beside Wu Xiaodong and snatched his 1,000-bull saber. Wu Xiaodong's body lost its support and fell forward. The saber in Yang Fan's hand flashed with a white light, and a head fell to the ground. Not far away, Kai Dongqing's eyes were lifeless as he watched all of this. He powerlessly raised his saber and then loosened his hand. The saber in his hand fell to the ground, and his body also slowly leaned back. Yang Fan raised his hand, and a light will appeared in his palm, whistling as it rolled toward Kai Dongqing. At the same time, his figure rapidly retreating toward the house that Kai Dongqing and Wu Xiaodong had just emerged from. A light green silhouette flashed past the steps, flashed past the door, and suddenly flashed into the room. As soon as the figure entered the room, the two doors immediately closed with a bang. Several timely sharp arrows were nailed into the door, and the good quality Nanma door was pierced through. Who? The rotating saber will swept past the neck of Kai Dongqing, who was about to fall, and chopped off his head. Not only did this assassin kill someone, he even risked the danger of being hit by the sharp arrows and insisted on chopping off the other person's head. Even if the other person was already dead, he still insisted on mutilating the corpse. What kind of hatred was this? Thinking about it carefully, it seemed that a general of the Fengqin Guards and 4 generals of the 1,000 Oxen Guards had all been decapitated. 5 people, 5 heads. These generals of the Fengqin Guards had only come to help them capture the thief. So how did they end up incurring such hatred from this assassin? Everyone was holding their weapons and standing there with torches, looking at the 2 headless corpses on the ground. Their hearts were filled with waves of cold. Just as they were panicking, thick smoke accompanied by fire came out of the house. The assassin had set fire to the house. Immediately after, flames began to rise everywhere, and the entire Yang residence was lit up in the night sky of Luoyang. The entire Yang residence had become a pot of porridge. There were people saving people, people running for their lives, people trying to save their belongings. There were cries, roars, curses, the workshop attendants, Marquis of Wu, the soldiers, the officials of the Ministry of Justice, the officials of Luoyang Prefecture, and the servants of the Yang family. These people all had their own commanders and did not belong to any of them. In such a chaotic situation, they were all like headless flies. Under the command of their superiors, they were all trying to deal with the situation before them. The assassin had not left yet. He flashed left and right, incessantly setting fire, turning the entire Yang residence upside down. The soldiers chased after him relentlessly, but he appeared and disappeared like a fish in water in the Yang residence. Bows and arrows were completely useless in this chaotic situation. It seemed that after killing the person he wanted to kill, the assassin's wish had been fulfilled, and he only wanted to cause trouble. Although he could not cause too much damage to the Yang residence under the pressure of the soldiers, he did not leave. Instead, he set fire everywhere and injured people. The number of workers and soldiers he injured was no less than 10. In the end, other than the soldiers who were enraged, as long as the others saw the assassin appear, they would scatter, not daring to fight at all. "Save me! Put out the fire! Quick, take out the valuables inside! Catch the assassin!" Amidst the rising and falling shouts, Yang Fan also stumbled out. His shoulder was injured, and he covered it with one hand. He was only wearing a small shirt, and his hair was disheveled. He looked incomparably miserable, because he was determined to cut off Wu Xiaodong and Kai Dongqing's heads. Yang Fan's movements were still a moment too slow. The moment he dodged into the room, a sharp arrow passed through the gap of the door and hit him in the shoulder. In order to avoid being seen by others, he simply stabbed his own wound with a knife. Earlier, he had used the knife to injure people for this purpose. Steward Lu grabbed a person and shouted to put out the fire. Yang Fan, who had just found someone to help him bandage his wound, was also grabbed as a strong man. He broke a branch from somewhere and desperately beat it a few times. Taking advantage of the fact that no one was paying attention, he went around to the other side of the fire. Taking advantage of the fact that no one was paying attention, he dashed into a house that had not yet caught on fire. In a moment, Yang Fan came out through the back window, and the fire in the room was already lit. Not long after, Yang Fan appeared in another fire. He splashed a basin of water on the burning torch, then carried the basin and ran back. On the way to the pond, he killed 2 soldiers who were alone. After a while, the kitchen in the side courtyard also caught on fire. Then, in front of Yang Mingxing's bedroom, a bucket of vegetable oil fell to the ground and turned into a raging fire. "Oh, what's wrong? What's wrong?" Yang Fan was running in panic when he bumped into a person and fell to the ground together. The person got up in a panic. It was Yang Mingxing's little attendant, Mu Ning. Yang Mingxing could not study, nor could he handle official business. He could not even drink tea, and his temper had become more and more strange. Therefore, Mu Ninger did not need to serve him these days. His dormitory was lent to an inspector of the Ministry of Justice, and he himself moved to the front residence. At this time, he had just run to the back residence. Mu Ninger cried, "The assassins have set the fire! Many people have been killed. Put out the fire, save Ah Lang. Ah Lang's residence is on fire. Hurry up, save Ah Lang." Steward Lu appeared at the door of Yang Mingxing's bedroom with a face full of smoke. He cried, "Hurry up, save Ah Lang." At this time, most of the houses were made of wood, so it was easy to catch fire. Moreover, Yang Fan had poured a bucket of vegetable oil on the ground, which made the fire even fiercer. The fire was so fierce that the doors and windows were sealed. Even those who were 3 or 4 feet away could feel the heat wave hitting their faces. Who dared to go forward? Steward Lu raised his hand to the sky and shouted, "Save Ah Lang! 100,000. Reward him 100,000. Money was something that could only be earned and spent if one was alive. The assassins were killing people everywhere. Now, even the servants of the Yang mansion were hiding and looking for a way to survive. It was fine for a few family members to pour a bucket of water on the fire, but who would be willing to rush into the burning house to save people? Everyone pretended not to hear. 1 million. Whoever saves Ah Lang will be rewarded with 1 million. Steward Lu was so anxious that he could not find his wife in the chaos. So he simply took over the house and offered a reward of 1 million. In the raging fire, Yang Fan stepped forward bravely and said, "I'll go." The servants and maids around him all looked at him, only to see him standing in the eye of the money, with the word Kai above his head, the word Yuan under his feet, the word Tong in his left hand, and the word Bao in his right hand. The image of a shy boy suddenly became unusually tall. Steward Lu said excitedly, "Good, good, good. Hurry up and save Ah Lang. I won't go back on my word." Yang Fan snatched a quilt, and a few servants beside him immediately carried a few buckets of water and poured it on the quilt. Yang Fan wrapped the soaked quilt, dashed a few steps, and threw himself into the bonfire. Chapter 77. The fire in the room was actually not too big. The silk screen in the outer room had already been burnt by the high temperature, but the furniture and utensils were still unharmed. At this moment, the room was like the water curtain cave in the mountain of flowers and fruits. Outside was a curtain of water, but inside was a different world. Yang Mingxing felt his way to the door of the room, even though his face was wrapped in thick bandages, but his hands and feet were being roasted, and the heat waves he breathed in and swallowed made it clear to him that there was a fire in the room. Yang Mingxing could not help but shout, "Someone come! Someone come quickly!" He had once felt that there was nothing left to live for, but when the god of death really walked in front of him, he still felt fear from the bottom of his heart. "Sir Langzhong, there is no need to be anxious. It will take a while for the fire to reach here." An old and somewhat hoarse voice suddenly sounded in his ears. This voice was far too familiar to Yang Mingxing. He did not know how many nightmares he had these past few days, but all of them were filled with this voice. Yang Mingsheng jumped in fright and almost fell down, but he was firmly supported by a pair of arms. The heat in the room surged, but Yang Mingsheng felt a bone-chilling cold. He would never forget this person. It was this person who used boiling water to cruelly blind his eyes, burned his face, and destroyed his future and hopes. Now he heard this voice again. Yang Mingsheng's body violently trembled. He suddenly asked in a hoarse voice, "Where is Kai Dongcheng?" "Dead. Wu Xiaodong." "He's also dead." That person lightly laughed. "In addition, a few people have died. Right now, your residence is on fire. When the sun rises, your residence will become a piece of white land." Yang Mingsheng screamed in a hoarse voice, "Demon, you demon!" "Don't be impatient, Yang Longzhong. We don't have much time left." The voice by his ear was very gentle. "This fire is actually not big at all. It will only burn one of your Yang family's residences. For the entirety of Luoyang City, and even for the entire Xiaowen workshop, it will not have the slightest effect. It will not affect other families, and even your own family and relatives will not be affected much." The outer hall had already begun to burn. The doors and windows made crackling sounds, just like firecrackers during the New Year. Yang Fan said, "You and your wife do not get along. I heard that even your daughter is not your biological daughter." Yang Fan moved closer to his ear and whispered, "That little girl, I've seen her before. She is very beautiful. That facial features really do not resemble you at all. Master Lang Zhong is really perceptive. She is indeed not your daughter. No wonder you dislike her so much." Yang Mingsheng was so angry that his entire body began to tremble. His eye sockets were filled with pain, most likely from his wounds. "Get out of my way! Get out of my way!" Yang Fan leisurely said, "If you die, your wife can remarry. Perhaps she can marry the person she truly likes. And the daughter you've raised for so many years will also find her biological father. They can live better lives, at least happier than when they were by your side. Your family and servants can also be packed up and sent to other people. And this residence of yours, after it has been burnt to a piece of white land, your wife will perhaps sell this land to someone else and move in with her lover. Or perhaps she will build a new mansion here. After all, although her family does not have any power, they are very rich. They can build a bedroom here and set up her wedding bed on top of your bones." Yang Mingsheng's body was trembling. Every word of Yang Fan was like a knife, deeply stabbing into his heart. Every word that Yang Fan said undoubtedly had a high possibility of becoming a reality. Because of this, that kind of anger and sorrow was far more unbearable than the pain on his body. But he was no longer the authoritative disciplinary officer of the Ministry of Justice who held the power of life and death. In the raging fire, he was only a blind man without the strength to truss a chicken. An assassin could crush him like an ant at any time. He was trembling like a leaf in the wind. Yang Fan's voice gradually became cold, like a bleak autumn wind, blowing past his body. "And me? Yang Longzhong. That fire that you set burned my sky, burned everything that I had. That day, I fell from a tree and went out for the first time after recuperating at home for 3 months. That day, my mother was making bone soup for me at home. She said that it would take 100 days for my injured muscles and bones to recover, so I still had to continue recuperating. My father was sharpening a ruler. Because I did not want to study properly, he broke the ruler when he was teaching me a lesson. That day, Sister Xiuxiu was embroidering a wedding dress under the sun, while Uncle Chiu and Uncle Fong were playing chess under the shade of a tree. I don't remember whether it was a locust tree or an elm tree. It was too long ago. That day, my neighbor Sanshizi was herding sheep in the wilderness. I was chased by a big white goose, and my sister carried me up the mountain." Yang Fan's eyes gradually filled with crystalline tears. He looked at Yang Mingsheng, who could no longer stand steadily. The light from the fire reflected on his face, but it was as cold as reflecting a block of ice. With a single order from you, all of my family died, my friends and my neighbors also died. That village was labeled as a plague, and since then it has become an abandoned land. Now it has become a wasteland. You killed my entire family, but I only seek revenge on you, not your wife and daughter. You are much luckier than me. Don't you think so, Yang Longzhong? You are not an old man. Hearing his words, Yang Mingxing suddenly came back to his senses. Yang Fan quietly said, "Yes, I am not old. That year, I was only 9 years old. Thanks to you, from that year onwards, I became an orphan." His voice was no longer old, but had returned to the clear voice of a young man. Yang Mingxing's trembling body gradually calmed down. He already knew that he had no way out. The other party would not let him go, so why should he be afraid? After all, he was not an ordinary person. At this time, his spiritual sense gradually became clear. Thinking back to everything that had happened in the past, he could no longer say that he hated him. After all, the other party had enough reason to seek revenge on him. Although if he had the slightest chance, he still would not let go of the opportunity to put the other party to death. But this in itself had nothing to do with hatred. But he also knew that this kind of opportunity was also impossible. Right now, he only had one doubt left. Why did this person take the risk to break into the room to see him? Yang Longzhong, your life ends today. I came to see you because I want to ask clearly who it was that made you come all the way to Xiaozhou to kill people. Who is the mastermind behind the scenes, and what is your purpose? Yang Mingxing let out a strange sneer and asked mockingly, "What makes you think I will tell you?" Yang Fan said, "Because Kai Dongqing and the others are all dead, and you will die soon. If you don't tell me, it is very likely that I will never find out the truth of the Xiaozhou murder case." Yang Mingxing sneered and said, "So what? Could it be that if the Xiaozhou murder case cannot be redressed, I will not die in peace?" Yang Fan said calmly, "In that case, I won't be able to find the real murderer. If I can't find the real murderer, I won't be able to continue the investigation. If I can't continue the investigation, then for me it will be a pity, but I won't be in any danger. I can buy a house, marry a wife, have children, and live a good life. And the real mastermind behind you can also live with a clear conscience until he dies of old age. I think this is not what you want to see, right?" These words sounded a bit strange, but Yang Mingxing understood, so he became silent. Yang Mingxing was silent for a long time. The fire was burning closer and closer. Even Yang Fan had a feeling of suffocation and burning pain. From time to time, a piece of wood for fuel would fall from the roof, and sparks would fly in front of them. The house was already on the verge of collapse. Yang Fan wrapped himself in the quilt and said, "Originally, I wanted to give you a quick death. Now, you can slowly burn in the fire. When the fire engulfs your body, remember to think about how many innocent people have died in your hands like this." Yang Fan wanted to jump out of the house, but Yang Mingxing suddenly shouted, "Wait." Yang Fan stopped. Yang Mingxing screamed, "Miao Shinka, Qiu Shinji." Yang Fan flashed to his side, raised his foot and kicked, using a square table to knock away a falling wooden beam. Amid the sparks, he asked, "Miao Shinka Qiu Shinji? Why did they want to massacre that manor?" He had heard of the name Qiu Shinji, but he had never heard of Miao Shinka. Yang Mingxing laughed crazily. His laughter sounded like he was crying. "How would I know? Ha ha ha! In the eyes of the powerful, I, Yang, am just a nobody. If they want me to do something, I have to do it. How would I know why? Ha 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 ha! I also want to know why." When Yang Fan rushed out of the fire, the house behind him shook a few times and collapsed with a loud bang. The fire immediately became more intense, forcing people to retreat more than 10 steps before they could stand firmly. Yang Fan's clothes were burnt in many places, and his hair and eyebrows were burnt. Steward Lu supported him and asked anxiously, "Where is our Ah Leng?" Yang Fan shook his head and said, "The fire was too big. I didn't find the doctor. Later, I couldn't bear it anymore and ran out." The sky was turning white. Amidst the dancing flames, the bell on the gate of heaven rang. The ringing of the bell covered the cries and screams in Yang Mingxing's house. Chapter 78. Yang Langzhong's residence has so many soldiers and officials. Since when was it your turn to show off? You just had to rush in to save him. Look at your injuries. What if you become disabled? Jiang Sining sat on the edge of the bed and kept complaining. His mother and Ma Qiao stood to the side and let Jiang Sining say all the words. Even they couldn't interrupt. Pasta was an unmarried lady, and Yang Fan was a single young man. Therefore, Jiang Sining didn't usually come to Yang Fan's house. This time, when he heard that Yang Fan was injured at Lang Zhong's residence, he hurriedly dragged his mother to visit. Yang Fan said shyly, "Sister Ning, it's not what you think. I was already injured before I broke into Yang Langzhong's bedroom to save him. The assassin was running around the residence and setting fires. I was sleeping in my room when I heard the commotion in the residence. I ran out in a daze and was stabbed in the head. Luckily, I ran fast enough. It's just that steward, Lu, clearly said he would give me $1 million at the beginning. Otherwise, I wouldn't have rushed into the fire and risked my life. At that time, Steward Lu said he would give him $1 million. However, since he couldn't save Yang Langzhong, the reward was naturally reduced. In the end, he only gave him 10,000. Jiang Sining poked his forehead and said coquettishly, what if you rushed in and burned your face? You'd look like an ugly monster. At that time, you wouldn't even be able to cry. You really value money more than your life. I was so angry that I wanted to ignore you. This is the chicken soup my mother made for you early in the morning. Drink it while it's still hot." She helped Yang Fan sit up. Mother Jiang poured a bowl of chicken soup from the crock. Yang Fan took it and drank a few mouthfuls. Suddenly he remembered something. He raised his head and asked, "Sister Ning, where did this chicken soup come from? You killed the old hen at home?" Jiang Sining nodded. Yang Fan lamented, sigh. "That old hen was very good at laying eggs. Why did you kill it? What a pity." Jiang Sining rolled his eyes at him and said, "Otherwise, how would you have chicken soup to drink? Is an old hen more valuable than your life?" Mother Jiang said, "That's right. Xiao Fan, don't stand on ceremony with us. Although you're not related to our family in any way, we're as close as family. Last time, Ning, Er's marriage was all thanks to your help. Otherwise, she wouldn't have a good life in this lifetime. Auntie only has one daughter. If I watch her jump into the fire pit, I won't be able to close my eyes even if I die." She stroked Yang Fan's hair and said kindly, "I don't have a son, so I treat you like my own. There's also Ma Qiao." Mother Jiang raised her head and glanced at Ma Qiao. Ever since Ma Qiao entered the house, he hadn't said much. Occasionally, he would sneak a glance at Yang Fan with a strange look. But because Pasta had been scolding Yang Fan nonstop the moment he entered the house, Yang Fan had no time to pay attention to him and didn't notice anything strange. Mother Jiang said, "I've watched Ma Qiao grow up since he was young. He's also very good friends with Ning. Ani is getting on in years. In the future, all of you young people will be neighbors. You have to take care of each other." Yang Fan said, "Auntie, don't worry. Although Sister Ning, Brother Qiao, and I aren't siblings from the same mother, our affection is not fake. We will support each other and take care of each other. In the future, no matter who is rich or successful, no matter who is down and out, this affection will never change. Sister Ning, Brother Qiao, don't you think so?" When Ma Qiao heard Yang Fan's words, the layer of doubt buried in his eyes was dispelled like the haze in the morning. He nodded heavily and said, "Yes, no matter what happens to us in the future, we will always be good friends and brothers." As he said that, he turned to Mother Jiang and said, "Xiao Fan, drink the soup. I'll eat the meat. Anyway, the taste of the meat has been stewed out. It's very unpalatable. It's a pity not to eat it." Mother Jiang was angry and amused at the same time. She said, "You only know how to eat. Here, Take it and fish out the meat. Sai, look at the mess in this house. Auntie and Ning, help clean it up. If a man doesn't have a woman to take care of him at home. Speaking up to this point, Mother Jiang suddenly remembered that Yang Fan's bride-to-be had just run away with someone. She couldn't help but regret her slip of the tongue. She quickly lowered her head to work and didn't say anything else. At this time, a woman's voice came from outside. Is this Yang Fan's house? Before the voice died away, the door was pushed open and a woman walked in. Ma Chiao looked up and said unhappily, Hey, this Ani is so unreasonable. Why did she barge in without the owner's permission? When the woman heard that, her face immediately became long. She rolled her eyes at him and said, What auntie? Who's an auntie? I'm still a girl. This Ani, who was still a girl, was about 33 or 34 years old. Her figure was a little plump and her appearance was quite pleasing to look at. Her skin was soft and tender, but her thin lips were slightly hooked and her almond-shaped eyes were slightly raised. No matter how you looked at her, she gave off a domineering aura. She was wearing a green dress. Judging from her hairstyle, she was indeed dressed like an unmarried girl. The girl in green looked at Mother Jiang and Jiang Suning and glared at them. She said, Didn't you say that Yang Fan is alone and has no family? Who are you? Mother Jiang didn't know where this woman came from, so she explained, Oh, we're Xiao Fan's neighbors. Xiao Fan was injured, so we came over to help take care of her. Who is this lady? At this time, Yang Fan also put the bowl of soup to the side. He looked at the auntie who called herself a lady and asked with some confusion, I'm Yang Fan. Who is this lady? The girl in green walked around Mother Jiang and saw that Yang Fan was sitting on the couch. She immediately pursed her lips and smoothed out her brows. She put on a happy expression, and her voice was filled with a cloying sweetness. This must be the second son of the Yang family, right? Ah. Fortunately, although his hair was burnt, his skin wasn't burned. Ayo, where are you hurt? Are you all right? As the girl spoke, she actually started to move her hands and feet to help him examine him. Yang Fan was baffled and quickly moved away from this Ani, who acted as if she was close to him. He asked, Who is this lady? The girl in green smiled and said, This servant's name is Kai Yun. My master heard that the second son of the Yang family was injured and specially asked me to bring a doctor to take a look at the second son. During the Tang dynasty, doctors were called doctors. By the end of the 5 dynasties, doctors were still called doctors in the north, while doctors in the south were called doctors. By the Song dynasty, doctors were called doctors. In this era, it wasn't wrong for doctors to be called doctors. However, to be called a doctor, one had to have some achievements in the field of medicine. Even if one wasn't a national expert, one had to be a well-known figure. The other party actually invited a doctor, which showed how much importance they attached to him. Yang Fan was stunned and said in surprise, May I know who this lady's master is? I've never met him before. Why did you invite a famous doctor to treat my injury? Kai Yun's eyes lit up, and she said with a smile like a flower, My master is a distant elder of the Yang Longzhong family. The second son of the Yang family risked his life to enter the fire to save someone. Although he didn't manage to save the doctor, the Yang family is still grateful for his action. That steward Lu only rewarded him with 10,000 taels, which made the master very unhappy. Although Yang Longzhong is no longer here, the Yang family is still here. How could such a heartless act come from the hands of the Yang family? Because of this, my master invited a famous doctor and asked me to bring him here to treat the second son of the Yang family. The master is busy dealing with the funeral affairs for the doctor. After the funeral is over, he will personally come to express his gratitude. After Kai Yun finished speaking, she flew out like a magpie and stood at the door, calling out happily, Dr. Jiang, please come in. Yang Fan and Ma Chiao looked at each other, while Jiang Suning said happily, It's rare that the distant elder of the Yang family is so understanding. If the Yang family didn't care about Xiao Fan, people would really criticize them. How could they continue to live in the Xiao Wen workshop in the future? Yang Fan secretly frowned. I always feel that the words of the servant named Kai Yin are somewhat untrue. A distant elder of the Yang family loves the reputation of the Yang family so much that in order not to let people say that the Yang family is heartless, he took the initiative to invite a famous doctor to treat him? Isn't he afraid that the Yang family will be unhappy? Could it be that someone is suspicious of me and is looking for an excuse to check my wound? Yang Fan secretly raised his guard. There was a horse carriage parked outside the courtyard. Following Lady Cayenne's shout, an old man in a green robe with a round collar and large sleeves got out of the carriage. He wore a silk headband and had a long beard. He had an elegant demeanor and an extraordinary bearing. Then a manservant got out of the carriage, carrying a medicine box. He was accompanied by 2 servants in green robes and small hats. The old doctor was a famous doctor in Luoyang. His surname was Jiang, and his name was Yi Chun. He was quite famous in Xinglin, and his nickname was Magic Hands Bring Back the Spring. However, this doctor only cared about profit. If you didn't have money, even if you were about to die in front of his house and he could save your life with just a little finger, he still wouldn't help. Because of this, his medical ethics were lacking and his reputation wasn't very good. However, this Dr. Zhang's medical skills were indeed very high. He usually went in and out of the mansions of the rich and powerful. Now that he was in such a small room, Dr. Zhang was very unwilling. He frowned in disgust and used a handkerchief to cover his mouth as he looked disdainfully at the people in the room. Yang Fan secretly raised his guard and said, "Thank you for your trouble, sir. I was only stabbed once and suffered some minor external injuries. I've already applied medicine, so there's no need for further treatment. Lady Cayenne, please reply to your esteemed master and say that this Yang appreciates his good intentions." As soon as Yang Fan finished speaking, Dr. Jiang pointed at him with his handkerchief and shouted, "Ignorant child, do you know better or do I know better?" Minor external injuries. Ignorant. Extremely ignorant. Bumping, twisting, falling, and even insect bites, scalds, burns, frostbite, etc. No matter how big or small, they can all be fatal. How can you treat them lightly? Yang Fan was stunned by the scolding and could not help but say, "Dr. Jiang, I only suffered a knife wound, not a sprain, not an insect bite, and not a burn or frostbite." Dr. Jiang blew his beard and glared at him, saying again, "Ignorant child, do you know better or do I know better? I'm saying this to tell you that if you're not careful, a small injury can turn into a serious illness. If it's light, it can turn into bruises and swelling, tendons and bones, bleeding and suppuration. If it's serious, it can damage the internal organs, causing you to fall into a coma and convulse for a long time. It can even turn into spasms, tetanus, and you can't be treated and die, not to mention being injured by sharp weapons." Chapter 79. The people in the room were stunned when they heard this, especially Yang Fan's mother. Usually, she didn't take it seriously when it was just a scratch. Now that Dr. Jiang said this, it was as if Yang Fan had a terminal illness and would die immediately. Everyone was so shocked that their faces changed. Dr. Jiang continued, "Let's talk about burns. When the fire poison enters the body, the light damages the skin, the wound is red and swollen, the fire blisters, and the serious damage is the skin." Yang Fan quickly interrupted him. "Dr. Jiang, I am not scalded. I was just burned by the fire, and my eyebrows and hair are curled." Dr. Jiang stared at him and shouted, "Ignorant child, do you know better or do I know better? Burns can be light and dark. Light burns on the surface, the heat poison will leak out, and the skin will fester. If it's dark burns, the heat poison will invade and damage the internal organs. If it's light, the heat will attack the internal organs, and the body fluid will seep out, making the patient restless, feverish, dry mouth, less urine, and death." Jiang Mu's mother was shocked and quickly said to Yang Fan, "Xiao Fan, don't be stubborn. Dr. Jiang is one of the 7 famous doctors in Luoyang. Dr. Zhang's words can't be wrong. Quickly call Dr. Zhang to take a good look at you. Then she whispered, Anyway, it's not our money. Dr. Zhang shook his sleeves, revealing his 2 hands. He put them behind his back and said in a clear voice, Yang Gu, prepare to treat. His little disciple answered, put down the medicine box, and chased everyone out. Get out, my master is preparing to treat. Jiang Sining was surprised and said, We are just watching from the side and won't say anything, so we don't need to go out. Like his master, Yang Gu glared at him and said in an old-fashioned tone, Fool! The patient is a man and he is injured. If you want to treat him, you will have to take off your clothes. You are a woman. How can you stay in the room? Jiang Sining felt that it made sense, so he left with his mother. Ma Qiao said, I am a man, I don't need to go out, right? Yang Gu glared at him again and scolded, Idiot! Our master's medical skills have always been kept a secret. How would we know if you know medical skills or not? How would we know if you know medical skills or not? Shouldn't he avoid suspicion? When Ma Qiao heard this, he left in a sorry state. Miss Kaiyin also retreated and closed the door, leaving only Yang Fan, Dr. Zhang, his disciple, and the 2 servants of a noble family in green clothes and small hats. Yang Fan looked on coldly from the side. He faintly felt that the purpose of this Dr. Zhang's visit was not as he had said. He secretly raised his guard, but on the surface, he still looked as if he was at the mercy of Dr. Zhang. He wanted to see what kind of tricks they were playing. Dr. Zhang walked to Yang Fan's side, bent down to look at him, nodded, and said, N. A few strands of his hair had been burnt off, and his eyebrows were a little burnt. However, it didn't matter. After a few days, they would grow back. If it doesn't work, this old man can still take some medicine and apply it externally. I can guarantee that your hair will be as shiny as before. Yang Fan laughed dryly and said, Dr. Zhang, even if my hair is burned off, it shouldn't be a threat to my life, right? Shouldn't you take a look at my injury first? Oh, right. Where is your injury? Yang Fan pointed to his left shoulder and said, My left shoulder was hit by a knife. Fortunately, it wasn't a vital point. I feel that it didn't affect my movements too much. I don't think my muscles and bones were injured. Dr. Zhang let out a sigh of relief and said, Only your shoulder? That's good. Untie it and take a look. The young disciple went forward to untie the bandage on Yang Fan's shoulder. Yang Fan didn't say anything and just let them do as they pleased. When the wound was revealed, Dr. Zhang bent down to examine it for a while and nodded, saying, N. Not bad. Although the wound is big, it didn't hurt your muscles or bones. After resting for a few days, it will be fine. He then sniffed the medicine applied on Yang Fan's shoulder and said with a face full of disdain, You call this golden wound medicine? Without at least 4 key medicines, the recovery of the wound will inevitably be slower. If the dressing is not changed in time, it will inevitably fester and rot. Even if the wound heals, it will still leave a large scar. Not beautiful. Dr. Zhang raised his head and said with his nose pointing to the sky, Disciple, scrape off the medicine applied on his wound and replace it with my own high-grade golden wound medicine. Yang Gu agreed and opened the medicine box. Taking out a box of white porcelain ointment, he opened the lid and a rich medicinal fragrance immediately rushed out. Yang Fan let him scrape off the medicine and did not refuse. Although he doubted the other party's intentions in diagnosing his illness, he didn't doubt the authenticity of the medicine. If the other party saw any flaws in the wound, he could have just turned around and left. He could have mobilized a large number of soldiers to surround the area, and it was impossible for him to have prepared medicine beforehand to arrest him. After all, the government is the government, not the thieves of the lower 5 sections. Moreover, if the government really wanted to arrest him, the most likely method would be to directly arrest him and send him to prison to investigate if he was innocent. After the medicine was applied, waves of coolness could be felt from the wound and the pain was greatly reduced. It seemed that although Dr. Jiang had bad medical ethics and was arrogant, he did have the right to be arrogant. After the medicine was applied and the wound was carefully bandaged with a white cloth, Dr. Jiang said again, "Come, take off his clothes. This old man will carefully examine other parts of his body." Yang Gu agreed and unbuttoned Yang Fan's shirt. Dr. Jiang's eyes lit up. Looking at Yang Fan's 2 strong chest muscles and his abdomen like a pair of plates, he praised, "Good! I couldn't tell that with your delicate appearance and thin appearance. Your body is actually so strong. Not bad at all." Looking at the smile on his face, it was like a madam suddenly buying a peerless beauty at a low price, causing Yang Fan's hair to stand on end. Dr. Jiang smiled and said, Come. The 2 of you go up and help. Take off his clothes and let this old man examine him." Yang Fan turned pale with fright. "Dr. Jiang, my lower body is not injured." Dr. Jiang twirled his beard and said slowly, "This is the problem of the fire poison that this old man was talking about. If the fire poison invades the body and cannot be removed externally, it will damage the meridians, causing blockage of the meridians. Women are of the yin attribute. When the fire poison invades the heart, it will be reflected on the face, causing swelling and pain or petechiae. Men are of the yang attribute. When the fire poison invades the heart, it will appear on the lower part of the body. Therefore, we need to examine the lower part of the body." Yang Fan was not an uneducated commoner. He would not be easily intimidated by this mysterious medical theory. Not only was he educated, the martial arts that he practiced were not ordinary punches and kicks. Instead, they were extremely advanced martial arts. Advanced martial arts were similar to the meridians, tendons, veins, and other medical knowledge. A skilled martial arts expert was at least half a doctor. However, it was not appropriate for Yang Fan to resist. He could only put on the appearance that he was best at. With a bashful face, he tightened his belt and refused to comply. Dr. Jiang became impatient and glared at him, saying angrily, "There is no taboo in treating an illness. It is fine if you are sick, but hiding your illness for fear of treatment is a grave mistake. You are a man. This old man is also a man. What are you afraid of? Hold him down for me and examine him properly." Upon hearing this, the 2 servants standing at the side rushed forward and pressed Yang Fan down on the bed. Yang pounced on him, and with a schwa, he tore off the quilt, and with a schwa, he swiftly tore off Yang Fan's trousers. Dr. Jiang, the magic hands bring back the spring, fiercely pounced on him. The treatment in the room did not take too long, but the process seemed to be quite complicated. Jiang Suning and Ma Chiao waited at the door. After a while, they heard Dr. Jiang shout, "There is no taboo in treating an illness. What are you struggling for?" After a while, they heard Yang shout, "Don't move. Be careful not to break your wound. I just applied medicine. Hold him down. Hold him down. Hold him down. Not bad, haha, not bad." Jiang Sining and Ma Chiao looked at each other in confusion. Jiang Sining did not know what was going on and could not think of anything else. He only thought that Yang Fan's injury was not as simple as he said and was very worried. Ma Chiao could not help but think too much. There is no taboo in treating an illness. He was stabbed in the shoulder. Why would he need to hide from a doctor? Could it be? Aya, that Tin Ano actually ran away with someone. Could it be because... The more Ma Chiao thought, the more the door was opened. Dr. Jiang clapped his hands and slowly walked out of the room. Jiang Sining hurriedly asked, "How is Xiao Fan's injury?" Dr. Jiang proudly said, "His injury is not light, but with this old man's magic hands bring back the spring. No matter how serious the injury is, it does not matter. This old man has already left some medicine for him. The white box will be applied externally, and the black box will be taken internally. Take it once a day and change the dressing. If he recuperates well, he will recover completely in 10 days to half a month." Dr. Jiang twirled his beard and thought for a while, then said, Later this old man will ask my disciple to send over the fleece flower ointment. Take it once a day, and let him take it on time. Fleece flower ointment? Jiang Suning was stunned. He really could not understand why this divine doctor would suddenly change the topic from such a serious injury to hair and eyebrows. Yang Fan was a man, not a girl. Did he need to care so much about hair and eyebrows? Dr. Jiang did not wait for her to ask again and swaggered out of the courtyard. His disciple followed, closely behind. The two servants were the last to come out. Miss Kai-yin stood at the door and said that she would visit another day, then hurriedly followed Dr. Jiang out. After getting on the carriage, Kai-yin impatiently asked, "Dr. Jiang, how is it?" Jiang Yechuan shook his head and said, "Its shape is like a pestle. Its color is captivating red. Its head is as big as a mushroom, and its stem is tall and straight. Looking at its shape and color, it is hidden like a crouching turtle and erect like an angry frog. Its physique is strong, and its kidneys are full of water. It is truly a wonderful thing." Miss Kai-yin listened with bewilderment. She stared at him and asked, "Is it good or bad?" Jiang Yechuan said, "Its shape is majestic and full of capital. To a woman, it is naturally an excellent artifact." Miss Kai-yin understood this time and said with a smile, "Then it's done. Princess will definitely be very happy." Chapter 80. After Dr. Jiang's group left, Auntie Lu, her daughter, and Ma Chiao returned to the room. They couldn't help but anxiously inquire about Yang Fan's condition. Yang Fan answered them carelessly. They helped him clean up the room and prepared breakfast for the next morning. Only then did they all leave. In the past, other people could leave, but with Ma Chiao's temperament, he would always stay and chat with Yang Fan for a while. However, today, Ma Chiao also left very straightforwardly. He said that his mother had researched a new money-making gadget and wanted to go home to help. Yang Fan had something on his mind, so he didn't notice Ma Chiao's abnormal behavior and the strange look in his eyes. After they left, Yang Fan calmed down and thought about the purpose of Kai-yin and Dr. Jiang's visit. Yang Fan didn't really believe the reason they gave him. Their diagnosis process was even more unimaginable. That unruly Dr. Jiang didn't seem to care too much about his injuries. Of course, this could also be attributed to his excellent medical skills. These injuries really didn't matter to him. However, he actually cared about whether his eyebrows and hair could grow back as soon as possible. Especially with the absurd reason of fire poison, he forcefully examined his lower body. At first, Yang Fan even suspected that these uninvited guests were sent by Tin Ano. That mysterious woman had left a deep impression on him. Her seemingly omnipotent image was deeply engraved in Yang Fan's heart. However, because of this Dr. Jiang's strange behavior, he gave up on this idea. How could a young girl like Tin Ano incite Dr. Jiang to do such an absurd thing? There were no clues to the origin of this matter. Naturally, Yang Fan couldn't figure it out no matter how much he thought about it. He simply tossed this matter aside. These were only small matters. As long as he could confirm that the other party had no evil intentions towards him, there would be a day when the truth would be revealed. There was no need to deliberately investigate. What he needed to consider now was the problem of the murderer of the village massacre. Before he died, Yang Mingxing uttered two names, Qiu Shinji and Miao Shinka. He had spent nearly a year in Luoyang, and now he had finally taken an important step towards the truth. He believed that even if Qiu Shinji and Miao Shinka were not the real culprits, they were not far from it. He had heard of the name Qiu Shinji. There were many legends about the father and son of the Qiu family. Qiu Shinji was the son of Qiu Xingong, the founding minister of the Tang dynasty. At the end of the Sui dynasty, Qiu Xingong gathered his troops and joined Emperor Li Shimin. During the battle with Wang Shicheng, Li Shimin's mount Fengluzi was struck by an arrow. Qiu Xingong gave up his mount to Li Shimin and led the way with his saber. Since then, he became Li Shimin's most trusted general. In the 17th year of Jingguan, the governor of Daizhou, Lu Lanqing, was accused of treason and sentenced to death. Qiu Xingong was in charge of supervising the execution. Unexpectedly, on a whim, he dug out Lu Lanqing's heart and liver and cooked it to go with wine, which shocked the world. For this, Li Shimin reprimanded him. Since then they had been estranged. Qiu Xingong had 4 sons: Qiu Shinji, Qiu Shinji, Qiu Shinfu, and Qiu Shendang. Among them, the second son, Qiu Shinji, was the most like his father. Among Qiu Xingong's 4 sons, he was the only one who inherited his father's kung fu. Today, he still held a military position and was the general of the left guard of golden insignia. Qiu Shinji was braver and crueler than his father. When he was the general of the left guard of golden insignia, he was ordered to go to Bazhou to monitor the dethroned crown prince, Li Xian. When Qiu Shinji arrived at Bazhou, he immediately forced the dethroned crown prince, Li Xian, to commit suicide. When he returned to the capital, he said that he misunderstood the Empress Dowager's order. Hundreds of officials were in an uproar and impeached him one after another. Empress Wu saw that she could not offend the public, so she demoted him to Dizhou. But not long after, she restored him to his position. Only then did people realize that the so-called Qiu Shinji forced the crown prince to commit suicide was actually Empress Wu's order. People often said that even a vicious tiger would not eat its cubs. Empress Wu was even willing to kill her own son, who was under house arrest. It was really rare. Last year, Li Tang, the Prince of Yu, Li Zhen, Li Chong, and the others rebelled against Empress Wu. Qiu Shinji was ordered to suppress the rebellion. When he arrived with his troops, Li Chong was already dead. There was no more rebellion to suppress. The officials of Buzhou came out to welcome him in plain clothes and surrendered to the imperial court. Qiu Shinji then ordered all the officials who begged to surrender to be killed and their families destroyed. The victims were more than 1,000 families. Therefore, even though Qiu Shinji was a military general, he was ranked as the head of the 4 ruthless officials with Zhou Xing, Lai Junqian, Sui Yuanli, and the others. His reputation was well known in the capital. It was very normal for such a person to say that he had massacred an entire village. However, Yang Fan could not confirm whether what Yang Mingxing said before his death was true or not. Also, that Miao Xinka, who was he? When Yang Mingxing said those 2 names in despair, Miao Xinka's name was in front of Qiu Shinji's. At that time, life and death were at stake. A person would not have time to think, so the words he said would be the most direct. At this time, the first person he called out must be someone who was more important than the next person in his mind. A person who was more important than Qiu Shinji, but he had never heard of him. Who could this person be? Yang Fan gently stroked his injured shoulder and thought to himself, "Looks like I have to find out more about this person's identity. Everything will have to wait until I recover." Just as Yang Fan was thinking, there was a sudden knock on the door. Someone asked, "Is Beta Persei in the room?" Yang Fan heard the voice, and it seemed to be Su Fangjing's voice. He could not help but be surprised. What was he doing here, so late at night? Yang Fan sat up and raised his voice. "Is it Su Fangjing? Please come in." The door creaked, and Su Fangjing walked in. He turned into the room and saw that Yang Fan was about to sit up. He quickly stepped forward and said, "Hey, you are injured. Don't move. Lie down, lie down. This old man is just here to see you." Su Fangjing sat on the edge of the bed and inquired about his injury. He then took out a few strings of money from his pocket and said to Yang Fan, "Beta Persei, you were injured while working for the workshop. The workshop naturally cannot turn a blind eye to your injury. Don't let people talk behind my back and say that I, Su, am not honest. This money was pooled together by the neighbors. This old man also took some for himself. Take it to recuperate and buy some food to nourish your body. You don't have to worry about the workshop. This old man has already found someone to take your place." Yang Fan said, "Many thanks, Basho. My injury will recover in a month or so. At that time, I can work for the workshop again. These days, it really is not suitable for me to work. I can only trouble Basho to arrange someone else." Su Fangzheng laughed and said, "No, no, no. When your injury is healed, you can no longer work for the workshop. This small temple of ours, haha." Yang Fan's expression changed slightly. He said, "Is Basho going to quit my job?" Su Fangzheng hurriedly waved his hand and said, "Hey, you must not misunderstand. Am I that kind of person? Don't worry. As long as you are willing to work as a workshop attendant, you can naturally come back at any time. This old man welcomes you. It's just that." Su Fangzheng gave him a meaningful look and said with a beaming smile, "You are. Out of the depths of misfortune comes bliss. You've hooked up with a noble person. I'm afraid you won't do this kind of job anymore." Yang Fan's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly remembered the sudden appearance of Miss Kai Yun and that Dr. Jiang in the afternoon. He hurriedly said, "Su Fangzheng, what do you mean by that? When did I hook up with a noble person? Why didn't I know?" Su Fangzheng laughed and said, "There are some things that you will naturally understand in the future. This old man can't say too much now. In short, although you've only been in our Xiaowen workshop for a short time, we've lived together as neighbors. Everyone is very harmonious, like a family. No matter how prosperous you become in the future, don't forget about us. Haha." As Su Fangzheng said this, he stood up and said, "All right, I won't stay any longer. You can rest. If there's anything that's inconvenient, tell me at any time. This old man will help you arrange it." Su Fangzheng finished speaking and left with a beaming smile. He left Yang Fan alone and was even more puzzled. Noble person? When have I come into contact with any noble person? Why would Su Fangzheng care so much for me? As Yang Fan thought about it, he unconsciously thought of Tin Ano. Originally, because of Dr. Zhang's strange actions, he had already rejected this idea. However, he had interacted with him before and was able to invite Dr. Zhang, who was greedy for money, to pay a visit. It seemed that only this mysterious and powerful woman could do it. As for Dr. Zhang inspecting his body, Yang Fan suddenly thought of how the commoner women of the Western region would choose a husband for a trial marriage. And when the rich women chose a husband, they would first send a female slave to sleep with the man they liked. This was to confirm that the man did not have any hidden illnesses before they were married. Could it be that Tin Ano wanted to? Thinking of this, Yang Fan's heart thumped and he unconsciously became restless. During the time he spent with Tin Ano, although he always pretended to be ignorant, it was undoubtedly a very interesting and memorable life. That little girl, whose identity was a mystery and who could do anything, had already stealthily entered his heart. At this time, Yang Fan naturally did not have any plans to start a family. The most important thing was to find his enemy and take revenge, and then find his younger sister, Nyo. As for the rest, he was still young and could take it one step at a time. Even if he had the conditions, he would not let his family tie him down. But suddenly thinking that there was a very beautiful, very cute girl who was willing to give herself to him, that kind of feeling was indescribably comfortable. Just as Yang Fan was feeling comfortable, there was another knock on the door. A soft voice said, "Erlang is at home. This servant has come to enter the room." "Miss Xiaodong." Yang Fan was shocked. He quickly crawled back under the covers and closed his eyes, turning into a dying, unconscious appearance. Chapter 81. Miss Xiaodong's affection for him. Yang Fan was very clear in his heart. If others were good to him, he would be good to them. If others liked him, he would naturally like them. However, liking and love were two different things. It was impossible for him to fall in love with someone just because they loved him. He really didn't have any feelings for Miss Xiaodong. However, Miss Xiaodong's deep affection made him feel that he owed her a favor. It was inevitable that he would feel a bit guilty and timid. When he heard that she had come, he didn't know how to face her and could only choose to escape. In fact, this was also a tactful method. The door gently opened and Miss Xiaodong walked in with cat-like steps. Even with Yang Fan's hearing, if he didn't listen carefully, he wouldn't be able to hear her. She always walked like this, lightly, as if she was worried that she would trample ants to death. "Erlang?" Erlang. Xiaodong clearly wanted to wake him up, but it was as if she was afraid of waking him up, so her voice was very soft. Yang Fan closed his eyes and pretended to sleep, trying to keep his breathing steady so that she wouldn't see any clues. The side of the bed slightly sank. Xiaodong sat down on the side of the bed. Yang Fan was still unconscious. After a while, Miss Xiaodong's voice faintly sounded. Just do your job properly. Why are you trying to be a hero? If something really happened to you, would the government care about you for the rest of your life? Young and impetuous, you don't know how to take care of yourself. After a pause, the soft voice sounded again. It's good that you're not awake. Otherwise, this servant would be too ashamed to talk to you. AI. This servant knows that my appearance is ordinary and my mother is especially powerful. My family can only recruit a son-in-law. Erlang is such an outstanding man. How could it be possible? This servant knows. In fact, from the beginning, I knew that it was impossible for me to have the good fortune to be married to Erlang. But once I like someone in my heart, then I like them. This servant really can't think of any reason to like or not like them. 2 streams of tears gently hung on her eyelashes. When she cried, her voice was also very soft. Xiaodong gently wiped away the silent tears on her cheeks with the back of her palm and said in a low voice, Erlang, rest well. If I have time in the future, I will come to see you again. The edge of the bed became lighter as Miss Xiaodong quietly walked out. Yang Fan did not hear the sound of the door closing. After a long time, he quietly opened his eyes and saw that the door had already been closed, very quietly, very lightly. Yang Fan's gaze then shifted to the front of the couch. There was a bamboo basket in front of the couch, and on top of it was a set of brand new clothes. The stitches were fine and neat, and when he gently picked it up, it felt a little warm to the touch. When he looked into the basket, it turned out to be a basket of red-skinned eggs. They were all cooked, and they still carried a sense of warmth. Yang Fan held the clothes and looked at the eggs. For a moment, he was a little dazed. Over the next few days, Yang Fan had been recuperating at home. Ma Qiao's mother and Pasta's mother took turns to come over every day to help him cook, while Ma Qiao and Jiang Suning helped him change his dressing and chatted with him. The neighbors would often come over to help carry a jar of water and chop a pile of firewood. The way these ordinary people communicated with each other was not through romance or drunkenness. Their method was very simple. Although they were all small, unspoken actions, they were very heartwarming. During this period, Miss Kai Yin came over a few more times. Each time, she would bring high-grade tonics that the common people had never heard of. However, Ma Qiao's mother and Pasta's mother did not know how to make these exotic delicacies. They all used the ordinary cooking methods of the common people to make stewed vegetables in an iron pot, which was really a waste of the ingredients. Seeing that Yang Fan's injuries were getting better day by day, Miss Kai Yin was very happy. Although this Miss Kai Yin was a little snobbish and always rolled her eyes at the common people who came to visit the Yang family, she had a good attitude towards Yang Fan. Yang Fan did not show a look of annoyance towards her. He knew that she did not want to be called old, so he always called this big sister in her 30s Miss, which made Miss Kai Yin very happy. It was just that every time Yang Fan asked her about her master situation, she would always change the topic. Those who could become the master's right-hand man in a rich family were all smart people. They were used to observing people's expressions and listening to their words. Although they were all small characters, and it was impossible to play them like fools. Later on, Miss Kai Yin thought that her master thought highly of this handsome young Langjun. Once he became successful in the future, he would be very noble. If she could form a friendship with him, there would be many benefits for her in the future. That was why she went against her master's orders and revealed a little information to him. Miss Kai Yin said, "My master had instructed me to not reveal anything now. Once young Langjun recovers, my master will invite you for a meeting. Young Langjun, rest in peace and recuperate. My master is high up and noble. If you can gain her favor, your future will be limitless. At that time, I hope that Lang Jun will help you." Yang Fan wanted to ask again, but Miss Kaiyin only smiled and did not say anything. Yang Fan had also thought of following her car to find out where she was going, but it was not convenient to follow her in broad daylight. Since this person had put in a lot of effort to form a friendship with him, she would show up sooner or later, so there was no need to rush. More than 10 days later, Yang Fan's wound had already scabbed. Although he still could not use much strength, walking, sitting, lying down, and general movements were no longer a problem. Yang Fan then began to inquire about Miao Shinka's news. He used the excuse that he had been sick for a long time and his qi and blood were weak. He wanted to go out for a walk and exercise, so he left the Xiuwen workshop and went to Dingding Street. The two sides of Dingding Street had a total of 16 miles long and a height of 15 feet. It was all-inclusive and had everything. Naturally, there were posters for eyes and ears. Eyes and ears relied on their wide connections and many eyes and ears to help people find information and find friends and relatives. The main business of these people was to help people who came to Luoyang to visit relatives and friends to find the whereabouts of their relatives and friends. This also included helping to find abducted children and women. Yang Fan found the contact information of one of the eyes and ears from the many posters. After finding that person and paying the deposit, they arranged a time and place for their next meeting. 2 days later, Yang Fan left the Xiuwen workshop again and hurried to the place the two of them had agreed to meet, a small restaurant. This eyes and ears was called Zhao Yu. He was 37 or 8 years old and slightly plump. He had a very mediocre and good-natured face. There was nothing special about him. Yang Fan casually ordered a few dishes and wine. The two of them chose a table in a corner and sat down. "Brother Zhao," Yang Fan said, "I wonder if the matter I entrusted you with has been settled." Zhao Yu frowned slightly and said, "Brother, this task of yours is not easy. When people want to visit relatives or friends, they always have a name, occupation, and original residence. If we visit their neighbors and investigate their past, as long as the person is still alive, we will be able to find them. But the information you gave me is really too little, only a person's name." "That's right," Yang Fan said with a smile. "It is precisely because it is difficult to find that I have troubled Brother Zhao." Zhao Yu shook his head and said, "Trouble is not a big deal. It is just that in accepting this task of yours, I have expended a lot of effort and entrusted a lot of familiar Yamen petty officials. Fortunately, the name of the person you are looking for is a bit strange, so it is not easy to have the same name as someone else. Even so, I have expended a lot of effort to bribe everyone and ask a lot of people. This time, I won't be able to earn much money from you." "Oh," Yang Fan said knowingly, "if Brother Zhao can find some definite information, I can pay you more." Zhao Yu forced a smile and said, "There is no need to pay more. I will have to return half of my brother's reward, because I am very ashamed. Although I have found some information about that person, it was only some information. As for his current whereabouts, I am incompetent and have not been able to find out." Yang Fan was taken aback. After a moment's hesitation, he said, "No matter. Brother Zhao, tell me whatever information you can find. There is no need to return the original reward. I cannot let Brother Zhao work in vain. Please tell me clearly what expenses you have to pay for your bribing. I will pay for it." Zhao Yu was quite surprised to hear this. He did not expect this employer to be so forthright. He was ashamed and immediately stood up to express his thanks. Yang Fan pressed him to sit down and said, "Brother Zhao need not be so polite. Please sit down and talk. Please tell me in detail what you have found out." Zhao Yu expressed his thanks and sat down. "Actually, it is easy to investigate this Miao Shinka because his name is easy to remember. Moreover, he has some reputation in the officialdom. Most of the petty officials in the officialdom know this person. When I said I did a lot of useless work and spent a lot of bribing, I was referring to the fact that I wanted to investigate his whereabouts. In the end, no matter how hard I tried, there was no result. Yang Fan nodded. He said, "This Miao Shinka, who is he?" Zhao Yu said, "This Miao Shinka was a jinshi in the first year of Emperor Gaozong's Qianfeng. After he passed the jinshi, he was appointed to the Zhou Wang Fu as a military advisor. This Zhou Wang is the third son of the current empress, Li Xian. He is currently banished to Fangzhou." Zhao Yu had obviously put in a lot of effort to investigate. He spoke very fluently. Later on, Miao Shinka was promoted to Minxia province's residence officer. After that, he was promoted to writing officer and grand literature library scholar. His career was considered smooth, but it was not an extremely important position. But 3 years ago, a strange expression slowly appeared on Zhao Yu's face. He slowly said, "3 years ago, there was suddenly no news of him. I asked many of my friends in the Yamen, but none of them knew. What was even funnier was that when I asked some of my friends, they were surprised at first, but then they suddenly realized that if I hadn't asked, this person would have been forgotten by them." Yang Fan frowned slightly. "What does this mean?" Zhao Yu said, "It means that he gradually disappeared from the officialdom bit by bit." Chapter 82. Hearing this, Yang Fan was enlightened. That's right. With Shinka Miao's official position and position, if he had died of illness or a sudden death, there would certainly be some rumors in the court. If he had died of illness, the court would have given him a corresponding pension, so he shouldn't have gone unnoticed. If this person was demoted, exiled, returned to his hometown, promoted, or still active in the officialdom, there would always be people who would remember him. Only when he was safe and sound and gradually became inactive in the officialdom would people get used to his non-existence and forget him to the back of their minds. In other words, after this person was conferred the title of Baron 3 years ago, he began to fade away from the officialdom. It took 3 years until everyone got used to his disappearance and completely forgot about him. Zhao Yu said, "That's how it is. I asked many people, and they could still vaguely remember that after Shinka Miao was conferred the title of Baron, he attended a few other officials' banquets and showed his face a few times. After that, he slowly disappeared. Even now, no one knows where he is or what he's doing. That's all." Zhao Yu said shamefully, "I tried my best, but I couldn't find any more information about this person. I even asked for his address and went there to take a look. That house was empty with cobwebs hanging high and weeds growing everywhere. It's been a long time since anyone lived there. There wasn't even a servant to take care of it." Zhao Yu said to Yang Fan, "Such a person wouldn't disappear without a trace. But I've asked many people, and indeed, no one knows about his current situation. The only thing I can be sure of is that he's not dead. He's still in Chengdu. As for his whereabouts, I really can't find any information. I'm ashamed." Yang Fan looked at him quietly, and a smile slowly appeared on his face. He patted Zhao Yu's arm and said gently, "Brother Zhao, don't be ashamed. The information you've found is very important. Just this alone is very useful. If I had gone to verify it myself, I wouldn't have been able to find this information. Thank you." As Yang Fan said this, he took out 2 strings of money from his bosom and gently pushed them over. "This is the remaining salary. Please accept it." Zhao Yu's face turned red. No, that won't do. Little brother, you're humiliating me. Although I'm just a Jianghu person who runs errands to ask for directions, Jianghu people also have Jianghu people's rules. I didn't complete your request, so I can't accept the money. In business, there are always profits and losses." Yang Fan chuckled and said, "Brother Zhao doesn't need to be courteous. I'm already deeply grateful for what you've done. Please accept this money." After Yang Fan finished speaking, he stood up and said, "Innkeeper Bill." Seeing this, Zhao Yu no longer stood on ceremony and said, "Well, all right, today's meal is on me." Yang Fan said, "All right, then I won't stand on ceremony." Zhao Yu paid the bill and left the tavern with Yang Fan. Yang Fan cupped his fists and said, Brother Zhao, I will take my leave. You are an honest person. If I need Brother Zhao's help in the future, I will come and bother you again." Zhao Yu cupped his fists and said, I'm ashamed. Watching Yang Fan walk away, Zhao Yu stood where he was and thought for a moment. Suddenly, he took a step forward and chased after him, shouting, "Little brother, please wait." Yang Fan turned around and asked in surprise, "Is there anything else, Brother Zhao?" Zhao Yu said, "Little brother, I have dozens of subordinates working for me to make a living. It's really impossible for me to leave everything behind and specifically help you investigate this person. However, I will instruct the brothers under me that no matter what mission they are on, they will inquire about this matter. Once they find out anything—" Yang Fan bowed deeply and said, "Brother Zhao is very considerate." Zhao Yu said, "Little brother, if you say thank you again, I won't be able to put my old face anymore. It's just that once I have any news, I don't know where to go to inform you." Yang Fan's heart was moved. What he was doing really required the use of some spies and eyes. Rather than having to find different spies and eyes every time, he might as well make friends with this Zhao Yu. Looking at Zhao Yu's character and conduct, he was a man worth befriending. Thinking up to this point, Yang Fan said, "Every few days I will make a trip to Brother Zhao's place. Even if we don't do business, it would be good to visit as a friend." Zhao Yu was overjoyed. "Sure, little brother is a straightforward person. I am willing to make friends with you. Since that's the case, I will take my leave. We will meet again someday. Thank you for your trouble, Brother Zhao." Yang Fan cupped his fists and watched Zhao Yu stride away before turning to leave. Yang Fan passed through Good Fortune Lane and entered Thought Lane through the south gate. After turning onto the main street, he could hurry back to Xiaowen Lane along Jianchun Avenue. He walked slowly and strolled into Thought Lane. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of a familiar figure. Focusing his eyes, he saw that it was Ma Qiao. Yang Fan couldn't help but smile. Ma Qiao was sneaking out of a restaurant, his hand subconsciously on his waist. There was no need to ask, he was definitely here to dispose of stolen goods. Yang Fan had been recuperating at home while Ma Qiao had become a lone thief again. Thinking up to this point, Yang Fan suddenly remembered that although Miss Cayenne often brought some tonics, Auntie Ma often stewed chicken and duck soup for him to nourish his body. The Ma family situation wasn't too good. It was likely that Ma Qiao had secretly gotten the money to buy meat. Seeing that Ma Qiao had already left, Yang Fan hurriedly followed. Yang Fan quickly caught up to Ma Qiao and suddenly patted him on the shoulder. Ma Qiao had just disposed of the stolen goods when he was suddenly slapped by someone. His body shivered and he almost let out a strange cry. He turned his head and saw that it was Yang Fan. He couldn't help but angrily say, "You scared me to death. Why did you wander here?" Yang Fan said, "Oh, I was bored alone, so I came out for a walk." After saying that, he asked knowingly, "What are you doing here?" Ma Qiao laughed dryly and said, "Oh, there are a few shops selling livestock here. I came to buy a chicken." Yang Fan said, "You're stewing it for me to eat, right? Brother Qiao, look at my body. Although I'm not as sturdy as you, I'm still very sturdy. My wounds have already healed, and I feel like I've gained a few pounds of flesh. These days, in order to take care of me, you and Auntie have put in a lot of effort. I'm already very sorry. Your family isn't very well off, so don't continue to buy these things." Ma Qiao said, "What are you saying? My brother is injured and is in a hurry to recuperate. Why should I care about saving money?" Yang Fan laughed and said, "Saving money and waiting to marry a bride. To be honest, you'll be 20 next year and you still haven't found a wife. No wonder Auntie is anxious. You'd better put in more effort and quickly marry a sister-in-law for me. I can't wait for someone to call me uncle." Yang Fan laughed and pulled Ma Qiao out. Ma Qiao couldn't break free from him and could only give up his original plan. The two of them returned to the Xiaowen workshop. Just as they were about to reach the main entrance, a procession suddenly came out from inside. It was a funeral procession. The two of them unconsciously stopped in their tracks. At the front of the procession walked a few Taoist priests, ringing bells and chanting. In the middle of the procession was a Taoist priest wearing an apricot yellow robe and a five-elder crown on his head. He wore a pair of straw sandals and held a copper coin sword in his hand. He was waving it in the air and chanting. To the left and right of the procession were two green-robed Taoists, each wearing a Haran scarf. One was carrying a cloud banner, and the other was holding a seal. Behind them were a few manservants carrying banners. Behind them, in front of the coffin, the little Miss Xuelian was wearing a linen mourning dress. She wore a mourning scarf on her head and a mourning belt on her waist. She held a memorial tablet in her hand. Beside her was Madame Yang, who was also in mourning. This was the funeral procession for Yang Mingxing. Because the Yang family's case was too important, it wasn't until today that the funeral arrangements could be made. Someone carried a spirit banner and loudly announced the location of the funeral to the departed souls. "Doctor, raise your foot. Let's go out. Let's go over the threshold and on to the bridge. The road is flat. We're on the right path." He led the departed souls forward. Two juniors of the Yang family threw paper money into the sky with all their might. The paper money flew down like snow, drifting in a detached and free manner. It slowly flew to the ground and was calmly stepped on by the funeral procession. It was like the final destination of life, whether you were willing or not, whether you wanted to or not. Little Xuelian's face didn't show any signs of sorrow. Yang Mingxing didn't love her since she was young, and children were very sensitive to this. Although she was young, children relied on their intuition. No words or fake smiles could hide from the eyes of their hearts. However, Yang Mingxing was still her father. Other than feelings, there was also responsibility. She didn't feel sorrow, but she felt hatred. She held the memorial tablet, her little face tense. Perhaps, in her heart, the hatred far surpassed the sorrow of her father's death. Madame Yao, who was walking beside her, was already in her 30s. However, under her mourning clothes, she exuded a different kind of beauty. She looked like a young woman who hadn't even reached her 30s. Her appearance was indeed beautiful. On the side of the road, a bystander who was standing and watching discussed. "Look, that's the Yang family's madam." "Oh, she's so young and so beautiful. But looking at her, she doesn't seem to be sad about her husband's death." "Hey, you don't know they were husband and wife." After a round of whispering, the bystander suddenly realized. So that's how it is. But today is the funeral, so it's only right to put on an act in front of others. Yang Fan felt a slight sense of admiration for this madam. Some people lived their entire lives because of other people's gazes. This woman might have betrayed her husband, or maybe she had never liked him. She had only given up her own happiness for the sake of her family's development. But she was able to live a magnanimous life, living out her true self. This was also her loveliness. The coffin was carried by 16 people using thick wooden poles. It slowly walked along the bluestone street. Paper money flew up in handfuls and fell piece by piece, just like the fallen leaves on the trees on both sides. It was late autumn. Yang Fan's gaze lightly followed the fluttering paper money. Looking at the falling leaves, he lightly sighed and said to Ma Chiao, "Brother Chiao, let's go." There's no need to look anymore. Just as the two of them were about to leave, the sound of galloping horses' hooves could be heard. Even though they were still a distance away, the sound of hooves clattering on the bluestone street could be heard. A burst of laughter could be heard from afar. The two of them couldn't help but stop and look in the direction of the sound. Chapter 83. In the distance, 30 to 40 stout steeds galloped over. All of the riders were monks with bald heads. Some of them wore gray robes, while others wore red robes. In the middle there was an exceptionally handsome white horse, and on top of it was a monk. His red robes were half naked, revealing his muscular and beautiful chest. The monk held the reins in one hand and a wine bag in the other. As he spurred the horse forward, He raised his head and gulped down the wine. The sleeves of his red robes were like two red clouds in the wind, causing the falling yellow leaves to dance along with his figure. These 30 to 40 healthy horses suddenly occupied 80% of the spacious street. The funeral procession stopped, waiting for the dissolute monks to make way. Although these monks paraded the street on horses and drank to their heart's content, it was not a good way to go. But death was the most important thing. How could they not want to fight with the dead? Oh, no, the funeral procession is still not making way. This is bad. Ha ha, look, that Taoist priest performing the funeral. Yang Fan took a closer look and saw that the Taoist priest in yellow, who had the demeanor of an immortal, calm and composed, had a look of panic on his face. He held his sword backwards and retreated step by step, as if he wanted to hide behind the coffin. Stop! Great monk, the dead are respected. You monks, why don't you give way when you see my family's funeral procession? Why are you barging in? The moment they saw the monks galloping madly towards them, and even though they reined in their horses, they still refused to give way to the funeral procession. The Yang clansmen who were in charge of the funeral were enraged, and a few of them immediately jumped out and berated the monks loudly. Since ancient times, the dead were respected. Even if a funeral procession and a wedding procession met on the road, the wedding procession would have to make way for the funeral procession. These people in front of them were monks, and they should not be so ignorant of etiquette. Although looking at their rough and unruly appearance, they did not seem to be decent people. However, the Yang family was a family of officials, and they had the right to respect the dead, so they were not afraid. Those monks were just about to lash their whips and berate them, but they didn't expect to be reprimanded by these people who were wearing mourning clothes. They couldn't help but laugh in anger. One of them was about to lash out with his horsewhip, but at this moment he retracted it and said to the red-robed monk in the middle with a grin, "Master, this family wants us to make way for them." The monk in the big red kasaya burped and looked forward with his drunken eyes. When he saw the situation in front of him, he immediately frowned and said repeatedly, "What bad luck! What bad luck! Why did I run into a funeral procession? When I go out, I see a coffin, and I get promoted. Amit bother, no taboos." The monk was dressed in a large red kasaya, and it was obvious that he was a monk with a very high status. However, not only was he riding a horse and drinking alcohol, the words he spoke were no different from those of a scoundrel in the marketplace. The red-robed monk said, "Hurry up and tell them to cross." Is the one performing the ritual a Taoist priest? The monk was just about to wave his hand to call the funeral procession when he suddenly saw the two little Taoist priests holding seals and flags. He couldn't help but stare at them and ask loudly. A monk next to him said, "Master, you have a good eye. Those are the two little Taoist priests." The red-robed monk laughed and scolded, "Good your mother! They are wearing Taoist robes, and I am not blind. How can I not see them?" As he said this, he tilted his leg and straightened his back. Without holding the saddle, he jumped down from the horse. His movements were actually very agile and neat. The monk unscrupulously rushed into the crowd, stared at the two little Taoist priests, and asked loudly, "Just you two little guys, how can you perform the ritual? Where is your master?" At this time, an elder of the Yang family wanted to step forward and scold them, but someone next to him suddenly pulled him and whispered a few words into his ear. This person's expression changed, and he actually took a few steps back. Yang Fan and Ma Chiao saw clearly from the side and couldn't help but be more curious about the identity of this monk. Yang Fan carefully looked at this monk and saw that he was about 30 years old, tall and handsome, with thick eyebrows and big eyes, a straight nose and a wide mouth. His clothes were spread open, revealing a body full of strong muscles, and the lines of the muscles between his chest and abdomen were abnormally healthy. Such a majestic man looked like a Vajra warrior monk from a temple. "Where is your master? Call him out." The monk placed his hands on his waist and shouted loudly. In a moment, the old Taoist hiding behind the coffin was pulled out by a few gray-robed monks. Looking at this old Taoist carefully, this old Taoist was quite handsome. An apricot yellow Taoist robe, a crown on his head, a pair of green cloth shoes on his feet, a copper-coined 7-star sword in his hand, and a beard under his chin. His appearance was simple and unsophisticated, revealing an elegant and graceful air. Ma Chiao whispered to Yang Fan, "Who is this monk? Why is that old Taoist so afraid of him? Could it be that he owes him money?" Yang Fan shook his head, but he had already guessed something in his heart. He couldn't help but chuckle. "Watch carefully, I'm afraid there's going to be a show." The old Taoist looked embarrassed. Seeing the big monk with loose clothes, he went forward and bowed, and said the name of Taoism. "Supreme Heavenly Lord Tai, I'm Yizhua, the head of Hongshou Temple. Greetings, Master Huai." When the disciples of the Three Pure Ones saluted, they often sang Supreme Heavenly Lord Tai, or Supreme Heavenly Lord Tai. If a good believer encountered misfortune, they would sing Supreme Heavenly Lord Tai, or Supreme Heavenly Lord Tai. This kind of salutation was used until the end of the Qing dynasty and the Republic of China. Later, due to the work of storytelling, it was falsely called Boundless Heavenly Lord. In fact, the word boundless came from Buddhism, not from Taoism. Taoism often used supreme, supreme, and supreme to express the supremacy of Tao. The big monk laughed and said, "Do you know me?" The old Taoist said, "Master Xue is famous in Luojing. How can I not know you?" Monk Huai, he looked up to the sky and laughed. He asked proudly, "Old Taoist, this Taoist priest will perform rituals for people to expiate the dead. We monks will also perform rituals for people to expiate the dead. Old Taoist, tell me, are monks better at performing rituals or Taoist priests better at performing rituals?" This Taoist Yizhua was put in a difficult position. He knew the real identity of the monk, so he didn't dare to offend him. However, the monk's question was not just a matter between the two of them, but a battle between Buddhism and Taoism. Since the founding of the Tang dynasty, Tang Gaozu, Li Yuan, respected Laozi as the ancestor of his family. He claimed to be the descendant of Laozi and worshipped Taoism. He regarded Taoism as the family religion of the dynasty and issued an imperial edict. Among the three religions, Taoism was the most respected, followed by Confucianism and Buddhism. In the first year of the Qianfeng era, Tang Gaozu Li Ji respected Laozi as the supreme Xianyuan emperor. In the end, Gaozu died of illness, and Empress Wu became the emperor. Because Taoism and Li Tang were one, Empress Wu made great efforts to win over Buddhism in order to build her own power. She worshipped Buddhism, and the status of Buddhism rose day by day. At present, it had already impacted the status of Taoism as the national religion. Now that the big monk had raised such a question, although the old Taoist was afraid of him, he didn't dare to give in. Taoist Yizhua thought about it and braced himself to say, "Well, there doesn't seem to be anything to compare. Buddhism and Taoism should have their own strengths." "Oh." Monk Huai raised his eyebrows and smiled evilly. "My Buddhism mostly prays to Buddha and chants sutras to eliminate the sins of the dead. Relying on Buddhist power to save the dead, they will be reborn in the pure land of Buddhism, leaving the bitter sea of life and death reincarnation in the three realms and reborn in the Western paradise. I wonder how your Taoism does it?" Taoist priest Yizhua said, "When we Taoist fairy souls, we mostly use Taoist techniques to build path opening Tao grounds, lotus lantern Tao grounds, wound plucking Tao grounds, treasury filling Tao grounds, and virtue Tao grounds. We worship Tai Nirvana, Heavenly Lord, and fairy souls to the Eastern world of eternal happiness." Monk Huai said, "My Western paradise is a dignified, pure, and equal world built by the Western Buddha, Amitabha. The Western paradise is 28 floors high and has Amitabha, Guanyin, and Mahastamaprapta to help the dead ascend. The souls of the dead are attached to the lotuses in the 7 treasures pool and turn into arhats. What about your Eastern paradise?" Taoist Ijua knew that continuing to argue with this unreasonable monk would not end well, but he had no choice but to argue. He frowned and said, "My Taoism has the pure land of eternal life. It has 36 layers and is specialized in saving the souls of the dead. It is the best method for the soul to be reborn." "Oh, Monk Huai," he scratched his bald head and muttered, "why is it 8 more floors than my Western paradise? In my Western boundless world, one Buddhist land is equivalent to 3,000 boundless worlds. So, my 28 levels contain even more people than your 36 levels." Taoist Ijua could only smile bitterly. "I've never been to the Western paradise, so I can't verify what Master Huai said." Seeing that he didn't dare to argue anymore, Monk Huai said proudly, "The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of my Buddhism are powerful and don't fall into the 6 paths of reincarnation. Your Taoism is only an immortal, so your abilities are naturally inferior to my Buddhas and Bodhisattvas." Taoist Ijua mustered up his courage and said, "The immortals of my Taoism aren't immortals of Buddhism. Taoist immortals, regardless of whether they're innate or acquired, once they become immortals, they're free from the restrictions of external objects, not to mention karma. They don't fall into the cycle of reincarnation. As for Buddhism, according to what I know, there's no such thing as the 6 paths of reincarnation in the ancient Buddhist scriptures. It's only after Buddhism spread to the eastern lands, Monk Huai flew into a rage and grabbed him by the collar. "Preposterous! Are you saying that my Buddhism stole your Taoism's teachings and expanded the 5 paths into the 6 paths to raise our status?" Taoist Ijua was shocked to see him so angry. He could only swallow his anger and say, "Master Shui, you've misunderstood. Maybe I'm wrong in my understanding." Chapter 84. While Monk Huai and Taoist Ijua were fighting, the entire funeral procession stopped there. The coffin had not been carried to its destination, so it could not fall to the ground. The strong men carrying the coffin were fine at first, but later on, they were exhausted and miserable. But at this time, the whispers of the crowd had already revealed the identity of this great Master Huai, so they did not dare to step forward to argue. Monk Huai was originally a monk halfway through his life, so he was ignorant and incompetent. It was just that he had been a monk for a long time, so he more or less knew some of the teachings of Buddhism. However, if he really wanted to argue with Taoist Ijua, he naturally wouldn't be his opponent. At this moment, Taoist Ijua was showing weakness, and he knew that he was afraid of his identity. Thus, he didn't argue with him anymore. Instead, he said rudely, "Old Taoist, tell me, between Grandpa Rulai and Grandpa Laojun, who is more powerful?" The monk's words were neither fish nor fowl. Even Tathagata was respectfully addressed as Grandpa. Fortunately, although he belittled Taoism, he dared not be too rude to Lao Dan, the supreme Taoist lord. Therefore, he addressed Lao Dan as Grandpa. Taoist Ijua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At that time, the mortals of Buddhism and Taoism had not been confused by so many novels. In Taoist mythology, there were no Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and in Buddhist scriptures, there were no immortals like the 3 pure ones. How could he compare them? Taoist Ijua stammered and couldn't reply. "Monk Huai," he said proudly, "from the looks of it, you admit that Grandpa Rilai is more powerful than Grandpa Old Lord." At this moment, more and more people gathered on the street to watch the commotion. Taoist Ijua knew that if he continued to argue, he would be the one to lose face in the end. He really didn't want to argue with this kind of unreasonable person anymore, so he just gave in and let him leave. Thus he gritted his teeth and said, "Come to think of it, as Master said, Rilai's mana is more powerful than Lao Jun's." Monk Huai laughed out loud and said, "Since Grandpa Rilai is more powerful than Grandpa Old Lord, why are you still worshipping Celestial Venerable? Why don't you join my Buddhism and worship Buddha?" "Ah," Taoist Ijua exclaimed, "how can we do that? Buddhism is Buddhism and Tao is Tao. I am a disciple of Taoism, so how can I convert to Buddhism?" Monk Huai, he waved his hand and said, "What Buddhism and Taoism? Since Grandpa Old Lord isn't as good as Grandpa Rulai, let's invite Grandpa Rulai to sit on the first golden seat and Grandpa Old Lord to sit on the second golden seat. Buddhism and Taoism are one family, and everyone will be happy. Today, I will accept you as my disciple. Men, shave my disciple's head." Immediately a few monks rushed out, grabbed Taoist Ijua, snatched his 7-star sword, took off his 5 mountains Taoist crown, tore off his dark yellow robe, and pressed him to the ground. They even brought along a shaving kit. Monk Huai, he personally took the razor and began to shave Taoist Ijua on the street. Before long, the sage-like Taoist Ijua had turned into a bald, old novice monk. Because he had just entered the sect, he did not even have a burn scar on his head. Naturally, he was just a novice monk. This scene not only dumbfounded the passers-by, but even the funeral procession was tongue-tied. Shuel Yen was still young, so when she saw Taoist Ijua, who had used the 7-star steps and brandished the 7-star sword, turn into a bald monk in just a moment, she couldn't help but burst out laughing. At this time, there were already countless people snickering on both sides of the road. Monk Huai, he called for a monk's robe and gave it to Taoist Ijua to change into. At this time, Taoist Ijua's 2 disciples were also pressed to the ground and had their heads shaved in a flurry. They had become 2 genuine novice monks. Monk Huai, he looked at them and said with satisfaction, "They look much better now. You too continue with your ritual. Don't delay the burial of the deceased. Hongyi, Honglu, you too follow them. Once they finish their ritual, bring them back to the White Horse Temple to see me. From then on, they will be part of the White Horse Temple." Ha ha! Amidst the laughter, Monk Huai, he leaped onto his horse and swaggered through the funeral procession with a whip. Hongyi and Honglu, the 2 green-robed monks, crossed their arms and stood in front of Taoist Ijua. Monk Ijua, they slanted their eyebrows and said, "Go on, go on. You have accepted their money, so you should at least do a good job at their funeral. Won't you ruin the reputation of our White Horse Temple?" Taoist Ijua wanted to cry, but had no tears. He had become a monk since he was a child and had been a Taoist his whole life. Now that he had mysteriously become a monk, he could only wave the 7 stars sword in shame and continue with the ritual. Monk Hongyi said, "Hey, why are you still fiddling with the 7-star sword? You are a monk now." Ijua covered his face with his sleeve and whispered to him. "I am ashamed, Hongyi interrupted him. "Junior Marshal Brother, there are 15 of us now. You have just entered the sect, so you are ranked 16th. We are all from the Hong generation, so you are the 16th. You have to call us Senior Marshal Brother." Taoist Ijua lowered his head and said with tears in his eyes, "Senior Marshal Brother, I don't know how to chant the Buddhist rebirth mantra." Hongyi rubbed his nose and asked the monk beside him, "Honglu, do you know how?" Honglu said, "Bulsh asterisk T, how would I know how?" He waved his hand and said, all right, do what you know. Continue with the ritual and follow us to see Master." Taoist Ijua had no choice but to continue with the ritual. A bald monk wearing a gray robe walked in the 7-star steps and waved the 7-star sword while chanting, "The 3 pure ones, the merciful Lord of the 3 realms, the Taoist scripture master, great heavenly venerable bow, under the auspicious light, Luo Feng, welcome the dead to the shore. The clouds have descended, the cranes have arrived, the Dharma assembly has begun. The 8 trigrams are hanging high." Under the shocked gazes of the passers-by, a few monks chanted the Taoist scripture of salvation and led the funeral procession along Jianchun Street toward the Jianchun Gate. Some of the commoners on the street did not know the identity of the monk, so they could not help but click their tongues in wonder and ask about it. Someone said, "Who is that monk? Why is he so domineering? He has many disciples, and none of them seem to be good people. That old Taoist is afraid of being at a disadvantage, so he tolerated it. However, the funeral is being held by Yang Longzhong's family. Why did he swallow his anger? You're really ignorant and ill-informed. Didn't you hear that old Taoist call that monk Master Huai? Didn't you hear that monks say that he came from the White Horse Temple? Who do you think he is? Hee. Aya, could it be that monk is Xue Huai? Sure. Do you have the right to call out her name? What kind of person is he? Even the Empress's nephews, Wu Qingxi and Wu Sanxi, have to respectfully call him Master Xue, not to mention that Yang Longzhong is already dead. Even if Yang Longzhong was still alive, he wouldn't dare to point fingers in front of this master. As the crowd spoke, they revealed the story of the abbot of the White Horse Temple. It turned out that the monk's surname was Xue, and his Buddhist name was Huai. His real name was Feng Shaobao. He was originally a Jianghu man who played with spears and rods and sold medicine on the streets of Luoyang. Because of his strong physique and handsome appearance, he later became Wu Zetian's gigolo by chance. Wu Zetian was very happy to have such a young and strong man like Feng Shaobao. However, as a man in his prime, entering and leaving the palace would inevitably cause criticism. Li Tang's royal family was either good Taoists or good Buddhists. It was common for eminent monks of both the Buddhist and Taoist sects to enter and leave the palace. Thus, Wu Zetian had an idea and asked him to become a monk. With a decree from Wu Zetian, the abbot of the White Horse Temple in Luoyang gave his position to Feng Shaobao. Wu Zetian herself attached great importance to family status. Her Wu family was originally a noble family in Guanlong. Because she loved Feng Shaobao very much, she was afraid that he would be despised by others because of his lowly background. Thus, she thought of a way to change his name to Xue Huai. This way, he would be connected to her daughter, Princess Taiping's husband, Xue Xiao, and become a member of the Xue family. Xue Xiao would also have to respectfully call him uncle. This Xue Huai worked for Empress Wu not only on the bed, but he also did a few big things. One of them was the construction of the Ming Hall. The Ming Hall was recorded in the Confucian classics as the place where the Son of Heaven set up the court. To Wu Zetian, the construction of the Ming Hall was not as simple as a building. It had a deep political significance. This huge project was designed and supervised by Xue Huai. Of course, the specific design was naturally done by specialized craftsmen. Although Xue Huai was ignorant and incompetent, he had many wonderful ideas. Ming Hall was built in a grand, magnificent, and extraordinary manner. It was a total of 30 floors tall, and it became the largest palace building in the history of the Chinese server. Xue Huai used less than a year to build such a huge building. Moreover, he also built an even taller heaven behind the Ming Hall. How big and how tall was this heaven? The heaven had a total of 5 stories. By the time he reached the 3rd story, it was already above the Ming Hall. In the heaven, there was a large Buddha. It was built according to Wu Zetian's appearance. This large Buddha's little finger could hold dozens of people. Many readers might have seen the glory of this large Buddha in the movie Di Renjia and the Empire of Tongtian. And this large Buddha was placed in the heaven. It was easy to imagine how big the heaven was. Recently, Xue Huai became even more powerful. At the beginning of the year, Wu Zetian appointed him as the chief of the Xian Ping Road army to fight against the Turks. Xue Huai was just a medicine seller. The generals under him were not to be trifled with. When the Turks heard that the Tang army was coming, they avoided fighting. Xue Huai really wanted to fight with the Turks. However, after wandering in the grasslands for a few months, he could not find any trace of the enemy. He could only return in triumph. Because of this contribution, Wu Zetian gave him the title of second-rank great general who supports the nation. He became even more arrogant. Perhaps it was because Empress Wu was busy with state affairs. She did not summon him to the palace for a long time. Feng Shaobao dared to do other things, but he did not dare to wear a green hat on Wu Zetian. As a strong man, what else could he do? He could only summon a group of ruffians he was familiar with to the White Horse Temple to shave their hair and eat meat and wine every day. Since he became a monk, he could not bear to see others grow their hair. He could not do anything to ordinary people, but he could not shave millions of people in Luoyang and make them bald. So he vented his anger on the Taoists. Of course, Xue Huai had other intentions. Although he looked rough, he was actually a very smart man. He knew that the Taoists were closely related to Li Tang's royal family and were protecting Li Tang. Empress Wu wanted to remove Li Tang's life, so she needed to promote Buddhism and suppress the Taoists. He did this to create support for Wu Zetian. Because of this, ever since he returned to Luoyang, he rode the streets every day. As long as he saw a Taoist, he would catch him to shave his head and become a monk. This news had gradually spread. That Taoist Yizhua, the head of Hongshou Monastery, had already heard about it. So when he saw Xue Huai, he subconsciously wanted to hide. He did not expect that he would still fall into Xue Huai's hands. Yang Fan and Ma Qiao followed the crowd into the square. Along the way, they talked about Xue Huai's anecdotes. Yang Fan did not think that he would have any interaction with this monk in the future, so he did not take it to heart. The only thing he wanted to find was the whereabouts of Miao Shinka. Chapter 85. The autumn rain was endless. As the saying went, the spring rain was like an edict, the summer rain was like a pardon, and the autumn rain was like an elegy. The autumn rain always gave people a miserable feeling. The autumn rain had been pattering since morning and did not stop in the afternoon. As a result, the feeling of autumn spread and the world was desolate. On a muddy path in Guide Lane, a man in a light green robe and holding an oil paper umbrella was walking alone in the alley. Guide Lane was located in the south of Luoyang, beside the Changshe Gate. The southeast corner of Luoyang, the Changshe Gate, and the Dingding Gate had relatively few residents, because it was too far from the bustling city center. There was a large expanse of empty forest. Although it was enclosed in the city, it had never been developed and was full of wild interest. Because of this, it had also become a very beautiful place in Dongdu. Some literati who liked the quiet and some who had lost their careers and coveted cheap rent would choose this area as their residence. The man with the umbrella walked out of the alley and was surprised to see a quiet forest in front of him. The leaves were shiny from the rain, and the entire forest was filled with a quiet atmosphere. The drizzle was still fluttering, and a corner of a red cornice could be faintly seen in the forest. Walking on the dark green grass, when the dew had completely wet his feet, he would see a small building. The small building was built against the slope and surrounded by trees. It was very elegant. There was no flag erected in front of the building, only a wine banner that gently fluttered in the wind and rain. It was actually a tavern. The man with the oil paper umbrella did not stop and walked straight to the tavern. Under the dripping eaves, he closed the umbrella and revealed his appearance. This man was already in his early 50s. His hair was already white, and his face was covered in dense wrinkles. His eyebrows were thick at the beginning and thin at the end, and his slightly thin cheeks gave off a slightly miserable feeling. It was unknown whether he was affected by the autumn rain or the autumn wind. He looked up at the gray sky and sighed. He shook off the rainwater on the umbrella, pushed open the small bamboo door and walked in. The restaurant was very quiet. At this time, there were very few people walking around in the downtown area, let alone such a quiet place. In the rain, the customers felt as if their souls had been shattered. The winemaker had also disappeared, leaving only the old shopkeeper who was sitting behind the wine cabinet, dozing off with his chin in his hand. A guest pushed open the door and entered. Following that, a gust of autumn wind blew in, gently brushing against the string of wine and dishes hanging above the counter. The wine and dishes were all made of bamboo. When the wind blew, they collided with each other and made a series of tinkling sounds. The old shopkeeper seemed to be sleeping soundly and actually didn't wake up. The guest did not call out to him. He looked around and saw a man sitting by the window in a corner of the hotel. The man waved to him as he entered. The customer, who was in his 50s, walked over. Outside the window of the seat in the corner of the room, there was a patch of flourishing weeds. Although it was late autumn, they were still thriving. The window was propped up. The rainwater poured on it, making a dripping sound. Then it flowed onto the stalks of the weeds. Occasionally, a gust of wind would blow in, ruffling the clothes of the guest. The customer had a silk handkerchief on his hair and wore a yellow turtleneck robe. There was a sparse beard on his chin, and his face was slightly yellow, but he didn't look very old. The yellow-robed young man stood up and greeted him. He asked with a smile, "Are you Brother Yu?" The old man in his 50s nodded slightly. "I am indeed Yu Haoyang." The yellow-robed young man smiled and said solemnly, "Brother Yu, please have a seat of honor." Yu Haoyang glanced at him hesitantly. He took off his boots and climbed onto the couch. He knelt down behind the table. The yellow-robed young man also lifted his robe and sat down. He picked up a wine cup, raised it with his right hand, and supported it with his left. He gave you a very courteous toast. "The autumn rain is bitter and cold. Brother Yu, please drink a cup to dispel the cold from your body. We can talk later." Yu Haoyang had been invited by his informant, Zhao Yu. Zhao Yu had put in a lot of effort and finally found someone who might know Miao Shinka's whereabouts. However, it was not easy to find out Miao Shinka's whereabouts from this person. Yu Haoyang only revealed a little information, and the reward was very high. Zhao Yu arranged for him to meet Yang Fan directly. Yang Fan put on a disguise and agreed to meet him here. Yu Haoyang's official position was not high. He was just a court official in the Imperial Secretariat. The Imperial Secretariat was equivalent to the offices in the capital set up by each province in the future. It was responsible for passing on information to the higher-ups in the province. Those who could set up court officials in the capital were all feudal lords. Their primary purpose in setting up court officials was not to report on the situation within their jurisdiction, but to make it easier for them to keep abreast of the situation in the capital. In that era, transportation was inconvenient and information was not fast. How could the local high-ranking officials sit around and wait for news that only concerned them to pass through the imperial court? They naturally had to arrange for intelligence agents to be in the capital to keep tabs on every move in the imperial court. These people were not only responsible for gathering information for the local high-ranking officials, they were also responsible for contacting the nobles in the capital and building relationships. Thus, a court official was a very lucrative job. The local high-ranking officials could save money in other areas, but they would never be stingy when it came to the funds of a court official. Thus, all court officials were overflowing with wealth. However, there were exceptions to everything. As a court official, Yu Haoyang's life was even more bitter than that of a yellow lotus. This was because Yu Haoyang was a court official in the Imperial Secretariat set up by the Yutian Commandery. Yutian was originally a military town under the jurisdiction of the Anqi Protectorate. In the 20th year of Jingguan, the Western Turkic Ipi Shikue Khagan asked the Tang dynasty for a peace marriage. Li Shimin proposed that he cede Kacha, Yutian, Shulik, Zagupo, and Songling as a betrothal gift. Ipi Shikue Khagan agreed on the surface, but refused on the inside. After the peace marriage, the Tang dynasty used the army to forcibly take over these places. The Yutian Commandery was set up at that time. After the Jingguan, because of the political turmoil, the 4 towns of Anqi were sometimes established and the military towns were also changed. In the first year of Yonghui, Emperor Gaozong of Tang Liji abolished the 4 towns, and the Anqi Protectorate moved back to Shi Province. In the second year of Xianqing, the Tang dynasty quelled the rebellion of the Western Turkic Ashina-Helu. In the next year, the 4 towns were restored. In the first year of Xianheng, the Tubo conquered Kacha, and the 4 towns were restored. In the first year of Tiaolu, the Tang dynasty pacified Pei Xingjian to quell the rebellion of the Lanyan Commandery Ashina-Duji and the others and restored the 4 towns. 3 years ago, The Tang army was defeated by the Tubo and the 4 towns were lost. Therefore, the officials set up by the Yutian commandery in the capital became motherless children. There were personnel set up by the Yutian commandery in the capital and were not officials directly under the court. Their salaries were not paid by the court. But the problem now was that no one knew if the Yutian commandery would have a chance to restore it. So who would care about them? These officials were in an extremely awkward situation. Some of the minor officials with decent family backgrounds could temporarily rely on the help of their families. But for a man like Yu Haoyang who relied on him to support his family, if he lost his source of income, he would suffer unspeakably. Otherwise, he would not have come to today's appointment. Yu Dili drank a cup of wine and gently put it down. He looked straight at Yang Fan and said, "Brother, let's cut the small talk. What do you want to know? You can say it now." "Miao Shinka." Yang Fan slightly leaned forward and raised his eyebrows. He looked straight at Yu Dili and said, "I only want to know the whereabouts of Miao Shinka." Yu Dili's expression changed slightly. He cupped his fists and said, "You want to know news of him? My apologies. I will take my leave now." Yu Dili stood up and left. Yang Fan took out a green cloth bundle from under the table and put it on the table. There was a hua sound from the bundle. Yu Dili was about to put his feet into his boots under the couch when he heard this sound. He could not help but stop and turned his head to look at the bundle. It was really not small, and he could not help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. Yang Fan said, "What is brother you afraid of? What comes out of your mouth will enter my ears." Yu Dili's face revealed a struggling expression. Yang Fan smiled again and said, "Outside of this restaurant, you will not recognize me, and I will not recognize you. If anyone says that you have revealed any information to me, do they have any proof? Are you willing to admit it? Haha, brother Yu, it is better for you to sit down." Yu Dili's feet slowly turned around. After a long time, he returned to the table with difficulty and sat down. He closed his eyes and sighed. "Ai, a poor man's ambition is short. What do you want to know?" Yang Fan said in a deep voice, "I only want to know where Miao Shinka is now, and what is his whereabouts." Yu Dili suddenly opened his eyes and stared at him for a long time. He slowly lowered his eyelids and said, "You are investigating Miao Shinka's whereabouts because of kindness? Is it because of revenge?" Yang Fan said, "Regardless of kindness or hatred, once you leave this restaurant, it has nothing to do with brother Yu. Brother Yu, do you think it is better for you to know or not to know?" Yu Dili sighed, and the distress on his face became even stronger. "I do not know the whereabouts of Miao Shinka." Yang Fan slowly straightened his back and reached out to grab the bundle. He said, leaning against the window and listening to the rain hitting the banana leaves, "It has a different kind of artistic conception. This table of wine and dishes is a gift from little brother to brother Yu. Brother Yu, please enjoy slowly. I will take my leave." Yu Dili blurted out, "But I know who knows his whereabouts." Now, probably only this one person knows where he is. If you ask someone else, they might not know. The reason why I know about this is because of a fortuitous encounter. Yang Fan's hand stopped, and he asked, "Who is this person?" Yu Dili said slowly, "If I say it, without saying anything." Yang Fan pushed the bundle in his hands forward. Yu Dili reached out to hold the bundle and said slowly, "Shengguan awaits the edict." Yang Fan was shocked, and he cried out, "Shengguan Wana?" Yu Dili's face slowly revealed a sly smile, and he asked, "Do you still want to ask?" Yang Fan pondered for a long time, and his face gradually darkened. He said, "Brother Yu, are you purposely mentioning a person who lives above the imperial palace to fool me?" Yu Dili said, "Everything I said is true." Yang Fan sneered. "Miao Shinka is only a scholar who edits national history and is in charge of literary works. What kind of important person is he? How can his whereabouts be known only by the number one person in the world, Shangguan Daizhao?" A strange expression appeared on Yu Dili's face, and he said, Miao Xinke is only a scholar who edits national history and is in charge of literary works? Haha! Do you know what kind of books Miao Xinke has compiled? Chapter 86. What books? In the past, when the empress was still a Jiaoyi in the palace, in order to usurp the position of empress, she compiled books such as Biography of Women, Official Conduct, 100 Ministers' New Precepts, and Music Book, and distributed them to the world to build momentum for her. These books were written by a group of scholars around the empress, and Miao Xinke was one of them. Yang Fan was startled and asked, "So what?" The official said, 20 years ago, the Son of Heaven was in charge, and the Empress was in charge. The government, big or small, was heard by everyone. The power of the world belonged to the Middle Palace, and they were known as the Two Saints. Do you know how the Empress dealt with such heavy state affairs? Yang Fan somewhat understood, and his expression changed slightly. You mean, the official said, 20 years ago, the Empress personally chose a few knowledgeable and quick-witted scholars to fill the central government offices, such as the Hall of Governmental Affairs, Hanlin Academy, and other central government offices. They all held positions of no more than 5th or 6th rank, but they didn't have to go through the South Office. They could directly enter the Imperial Palace from the North Gate of the Black Tortoise Gate and see the Empress at any time. Although they weren't the Prime Minister, the power of the Prime Minister was gradually stripped away by them and transferred into their hands. At that time, these people were known as the Scholars of the North Gate. Yang Fan was stunned. He never would have thought that this Miao Xinke, whom he thought would be the easiest to deal with, was actually an important person with a greater background than Bikishinji. Although there was no such a prime minister in the official circles of the Tang dynasty, he was truly an important official who helped Wu Zetian ascend to the throne step by step. People often said that Shanghai Wan-er was the Minister of Internal Affairs of the Tang dynasty, and this Miao Xinke was clearly the Minister of Internal Affairs of the Tang dynasty. If that was the case, then their positions were equal. However, since he was extremely trusted by Wu Zetian and had great power, why did he disappear without a trace? And why was only Shanghai Wan-er the only one who knew of his whereabouts? When Yang Fan asked this question, Yu Yisher's face revealed the smile of a profiteer. The question that little brother has asked has too many implications. I have already said enough. So, if you want to know more, then you have to pay me another reward. As he spoke, he grabbed the bundle and shoved it into his arms. Yang Fan held the umbrella and walked slowly in the drizzle and wind. The drizzle had soaked the front of his shirt, but he did not notice it. His thoughts were completely immersed in what Yu Haoyang had told him about Miao Xinke. Wu Zetian had walked step by step to where she was today. Admittedly, she was talented and bold, but she lived deep in the inner palace. In the process of seizing power, she needed a powerful force outside the palace for her to use. This powerful force was gradually built up by herself. This power was like the two paths of yin and yang, divided into the two paths of the civil and the martial. The martial artist was naturally the Plum Blossom Inner Guard, and the scholar was the Northgate Scholar. There were 6 core members of the Northgate Scholar. When they were used by Wu Zetian, their positions were not high. They were the scholar Lang Yuan Wanqing, the left scholar Fan Lubing, Miao Xinke, Luigi, the right scholar Zhou Simeo, and Hu Chubin. Miao Xinke was one of them. He was one of the 6 hidden ministers when Empress Wu replaced Gaozong to rule the Tang dynasty. Now, where were the 6 hidden ministers? The scholar Lang Yuan Wanqing was originally the emissary of communication. During the Qianfeng era, he followed General Li Ji on an expedition against Goryeo and became the Liaodong chief secretary. He was ordered to write a declaration denouncing Goryeo. Unexpectedly, this bookworm's temper flared up. In the declaration, he mocked the Goryeo for not knowing the art of war and not knowing how to defend the Yalu River. As a result, when the Goryeo saw the declaration, they immediately sent troops to defend the Yalu River. The Tang dynasty's army repeatedly attacked but failed. They suffered heavy casualties, and Yuan Wanqing was exiled outside the mountains. Later, he was pardoned and returned to the capital. He was chosen by Wu Zetian and became one of the 6 scholars of the North Gate. Now he was the assistant minister of the Phoenix Pavilion and the prime minister of the current dynasty. The left minister Fan Lubing was first the household inspector of the Zhou Palace. Later, he became the North Gate scholar. In 20 years, he served as the Luantai and Tianguan, the second assistant minister. He was then promoted to the Minister of Spring Official, Minister of Rights, and served as the Luantai of the Phoenix Pavilion. He became the prime minister of the Tang dynasty. Not long ago, he was accused by Zhou Xingjiu of colluding with the rebels and was beheaded at the beginning of this year. The left minister Luigi was the assistant minister of the Phoenix Pavilion and served as the 3rd rank of the Luantai of the Phoenix Pavilion. He was also the prime minister of the Tang dynasty. 2 years ago, Lai Junqin accused him of accepting gifts from the governor of Gui province, Sun Wanrong. He also had an affair with a beautiful concubine of the rebel Su Jingye. He was sentenced to death by Empress Wu. The right minister Zhou Sameo was placed in an important position by Empress Wu. He was promoted to the junior supervisor of the Lin Tai School and became a scholar of the Chongwen School. Last year, he was accused by Sua Yuanli of colluding with the rebels and was sentenced to death in prison. The right minister, Hu Chubin, also died in prison last year because of the charge of colluding with the rebels. The 6 trusted aides that Wu Zetian had raised, except for Yuan Wanqing, who was the prime minister, and Miao Xinke, who had disappeared, were all executed because of rebellion or colluding with the rebels. How could Wu Zetian be so bad at judging people? These people that she had personally raised were all loyal to her when she had not controlled the world. Now that Empress Wu had the power to overturn the world, they all had the intention to rebel. Yang Fan did not need to guess to know that this was a good bough being hidden after all the birds had been killed. The 6 scholars of the North Gate had been used by Empress Wu when she had just become the empress. After so many years, they must have grasped many secrets and secrets that Empress Wu did not want others to know. The safest way to keep secrets was, of course, to make them shut up forever. Thus, Empress Wu began to sweep away the last obstacles before she became the empress. But why was Yuan Wanqing still so high and mighty? Why hadn't Empress Wu made a move yet? Why was Miao Xinke still missing? If Empress Wu had already made a move, there was no need to hide the news of his death. Judging from the fate of the previous people, they must be charged with a reasonable crime. Yang Fan let out a long sigh. It was as if he was immersed in layers of fog. This fog needed to be peeled away layer by layer, but from the Peach Blossom Village to Luoyang City, every time he peeled away a layer of fog, he felt that the fog was thicker, making it harder for him to see clearly. When would the truth be revealed? The rain was getting heavier, the autumn rain forming a line. The wind was also getting stronger, and the rain was slanting down on people. Yang Fan had no choice but to stop and take shelter under the eaves of a spice shop. Upstairs, Xie Xiaoman was drinking alone. This was a spice shop that she had opened for her elder brother. She had already arranged everything for her elder brother's future. She had even found a wife for her elder brother in advance, but she still couldn't find her elder brother. It was possible that her elder brother couldn't withstand the hardships of a beggar's life. It was possible that he would die young, but Xiaoman refused to think about this problem. She firmly believed that her elder brother was still alive. This persistence was not so much because of her trust in her elder brother, but because of the fear in her heart. She was afraid that her only relative would disappear, and she would be left alone with the sky and the earth. Then, what would be the point of all her struggles? She was originally just a little maid of Gongsun Lanji. She took care of the young lady's daily life and also practiced martial arts with the young lady. Her original plan was just to practice a bit more, so that her elder brother wouldn't be beaten until he vomited blood and was beaten until his head bled because of protecting her. She was very diligent, even more diligent than Gongsun Lanji. She quickly displayed a talent for martial arts, so one hot summer day, She caught the eye of Auntie Xia, who happened to visit Auntie Pei's residence. At that time, she was sweating profusely as she practiced her swordsmanship under the sun. Her sweat had soaked her hair and stuck to her forehead. Auntie Xia asked her if she was willing to come with her. Practicing martial arts might be harder, but she wouldn't have to be a servant girl anymore. She could still have a lot of power and wealth. This wasn't something that girls liked to pursue, but Nyonya agreed without hesitation. She felt that this was what her elder brother needed the most. As a result, she became a member of the Plum Blossom Internal Guard. As a result, her performance became more and more outstanding, and she soon gained more favor from Auntie Xia. She became her adopted daughter and gave her a name, Xiamuwen. Later, the Empress of the Imperial Court gave her a little name, Aw Man. But this wasn't what she wanted. She missed her elder brother. She missed the elder brother who held her hand and ran in the rain like a fish. Xiao Man sat under the eaves and watched the rain. The rain was thick and dense. She was so bored that she wanted to see the gaps between the raindrops, but she couldn't. The rain was falling too fast, even faster than her sword. After staring at it for a long time, she had a feeling that she was rising rapidly, as if she was going to rise into the gray sky. So, she lowered her head to look at the ripples on the ground. She saw ripples formed by the raindrops, like epiphyllum blooming on the surface of the water. As soon as it bloomed, it withered and then bloomed again. She didn't see anyone taking shelter from the rain under the eaves. She only heard the sound of the rain falling from the eaves, hitting the surface of the umbrella. Looking at the rain and listening to the plop-plop sounds, she recalled the days when she squatted under the banana tree with her older brother, each holding a half-soaked bun and eating it under the rain. Yang Fan stood under the eaves with the umbrella and waited for the rain to subside. The rain splashed on the umbrella and flowed to the ground, creating bubbles. The bubbles popped up one by one and burst one by one. No one knew where they came from or where they went. In the distance, the giant Buddha in the heaven that towered into the clouds was overlooking the entire city. The Buddhist said that a grain of sand was a world. She wondered if this bubble was also a world. If it was a world, then in the eyes of humans, its birth and death was only a moment. But in this world, was it also an extremely long time? In the eyes of the eternal Buddha, wasn't the world of humans also just a snap of the fingers? But whether it was short or long, in this world, being born as a human was his world. In this world, he shouldered hate and love. No matter if it was hate or love, there must be a result. This was his mission. Staring at the bubbles that popped up and then disappeared, he seemed to see the fire in the mountain village, the charred corpses, the flying head of his elder sister, the ugly girl with the broken teeth, and the curly-bearded man who angrily broke into the governor's office with a sword. Suddenly, there was a sound of thunder in the sky. Yang Fan sighed, raised his head, and looked at the gray sky. Since I can't get Miao Shinka, I can only start with Chiu Shinji. Yang Fan gently exhaled a mouthful of turbid air and secretly made up his mind. The rain gradually subsided. He tightened the umbrella in his hand and walked out from under the eaves. Xiao Man sat alone in the building, watching the wind and the rain. She also saw the man in the rain. The man held an oil paper umbrella and walked very steadily and quietly, as if he wasn't worried at all that the rain would get heavier. The wind lifted his robe slightly and then fell again. There was a faint sense of loneliness, just like Xiao Man's mood at the moment. Xiao Man raised her hand and combed her hair. Her black and bright eyebrows slightly curved into a beautiful arc. Chapter 87. When Yang Fan returned to Xiaowen workshop, there weren't many people on the main street because it had been raining for a day. Even the few households that had food stalls were deserted. Some people hadn't closed their stalls yet, but they were waiting for the rain to stop before doing some business. At this time, they had already returned to their rooms to rest. However, when Yang Fan arrived in front of his house, he saw a light carriage quietly parked in the rain. 2 steeds were standing quietly with fodder bags tied around their necks. They had their heads lowered as they ate the fodder. The coachman was sitting on the shaft of the carriage, wearing a woven rush raincoat that had many water droplets on it. Yang Fan recognized that this was the coachman who drove Miss Kai-yen's carriage. He politely nodded to this person. That person sat motionless at the front of the carriage, like a statue. Yang Fan smiled. He knew that this person had always been a man of few words and might even be a little arrogant. A coachman, even if he was from a wealthy family, actually didn't have the qualifications to be arrogant. However, many people who had the qualifications to be arrogant treated others very modestly, and it just so happened that the subordinates of the people who had the qualifications to be arrogant liked to be proud of them. Yang Fan didn't care about this person's attitude. He pushed open the courtyard door and walked in. When he reached the corridor, he closed the umbrella and shook off the water. He placed the umbrella vertically by the door and stretched out his hand to open the door. Miss Kai-yun, who was dressed in green, was sitting in the room. When she heard the sound, she got up from the couch and quickly came out. Erlang's body has really recovered. You still want to go out on such a rainy day? Kai-yun said with a smile. Where did Erlang go? You made me wait for a long time. Yang Fan said with a smile. Little brother didn't know that elder sister was coming. I was bored at home and wandered around randomly, but I didn't have a definite place to go. On the other hand, elder sister, why did you come over on such a rainy day? Did you bring something delicious for little brother this time? Kai-yun pursed her lips and smiled. This time, elder sister doesn't need to bring anything delicious for you. Very soon, Erlang will be wearing luxurious clothes and eating delicacies from land and sea. Why would he be interested in what elder sister brought? Yang Fan said in surprise. Why does elder sister say that? Xiao Di has never been a high-ranking official, and I have never dug up a mountain of gold. How could I live in luxury, eat delicacies? Kai-yun smiled mysteriously and said, Others may yearn for these things, but Erlang is different. There is a noble who wants to give you great riches and honor. Today, elder sister has been ordered to pick you up. Erlang only needs to go with elder sister. As long as you nod in front of that noble, you will be rich in this life. It's just that when that time comes, Erlang will be rich and powerful. You must not forget this older sister of today. If I can help you a little, older sister will be satisfied. As she spoke, her pair of watery and charming eyes glanced at Yang Fan with some hidden bitterness. Yang Fan's long-suppressed curiosity was aroused by Kai-yen's words, causing him to overlook the hidden bitterness in Kai-yen's eyes. He said cheerfully, Master is willing to see me? Miss Kai-yen rolled her eyes at him and sighed. Men are all ungrateful men. They just heard that there are benefits, and they want to throw Big Sister over the wall. Let's go. Big Sister has waited for you for so long. I'm afraid that the master has been waiting impatiently for a long time. From the outside, the carriage looked like a very ordinary light carriage. Similar carriages could be seen everywhere on the streets of Luoyang. However, when one entered the carriage, the interior was abnormally magnificent. This magnificence was not reflected on the surface. There was no seat cushion wrapped in silk or satins, no gorgeous Persian tapestries decorated the four walls, and no gold and silver as utensils. Instead, it was reflected in the details. The carriage was a light carriage with oil walls. The logs were varnished, the corners were copper, and there were elegant pine and bamboo decorations. Each mortise and tenon joint was tight without any gaps. It was smooth and comfortable to walk. Even if one were to run a long distance, it would not shake the people in the carriage to the point that their bones would fall apart. The carriage was good, the horses pulling it were well trained, and the craftsmanship of the driver was also good. The carriage moved without the slightest jolt. Yang Fan could see that the carriage had been modified. Many of the magnificent decorations had been removed in order to make it look ordinary. There were subtle traces in some places that showed that some objects had once been hung or placed there, but they were now empty. However, it was also because of this that the interior of the carriage appeared much more spacious. A seat that should have only been able to seat one person did not seem very crowded with the two of them. In fact, the two of them could have sat further apart, but Miss Cayenne had insisted on squeezing with Yang Fan, so he could only feign ignorance. Fortunately, although Miss Cayenne had the intention of throwing herself at him, she seemed to have some misgivings. Therefore, she only dared to use her sitting posture to tease him. Yang Fan did not react, and she did not dare to take any further action. However, her expression was slightly displeased. The carriage was covered in a dense drapery. Yang Fan found it stuffy and wanted to pull it up, but he was stopped by Miss Cayenne. Although Yang Fan couldn't see the situation outside, he was very familiar with the nearby roads. He felt every turn the car made and moved forward. Based on his estimation, the car should have left the Xiaowen workshop and turned into the Shangshan workshop in front of him. The carriage continued on for a while before suddenly stopping. The cold-faced uncle said something to someone outside, and after a while, the carriage started moving again. This time it made more turns. Yang Fan felt that the carriage was suddenly turning left and right. It did not seem like it was driving on the main street of the workshop, but more like it had entered a mansion. If the carriage was driving into a mansion, it would take such a long time to turn left and right. It could be seen how vast this mansion was. After another moment, the carriage stopped. The door opened, and the cold-faced uncle stood in front of the carriage. He had already put down the pedal, but he did not say a word. Miss Cayenne seemed to be familiar with his demeanor and ignored him. She only said to Yang Fan sweetly, "Erlang, please get out of the carriage." Yang Fan bent down and got out of the carriage. He walked out on the pedal and realized that the carriage was parked under a long pavilion in the shape of a bat. The pavilion extended all the way to a long corridor with red pillars on both sides and a row of palace lanterns hanging in the middle. Just by looking at this long corridor, one could tell that it was definitely an extremely wealthy family. It was still raining outside. Because the carriage was parked directly under the corridor, there was no need to hold an umbrella. Miss Cayenne also got out of the carriage and said to Yang Fan, "Erlang, please follow me." Yang Fan did not ask any questions and just followed her slowly forward. Along the way, he saw faint greenery, deep courtyards, winding bridges, winding corridors, flowing springs, rockeries, phoenix pavilions and lawn pavilions, carved railings and painted rafters. There was not a single place that was not exquisite and gorgeous. It must be the back garden of some noble family. Looking into the distance, there were high ridges, curved eaves, black tiles and white walls, like layers upon layers of mountains. When Yang Fan saw such a scene, he could not help but be surprised. Could this be the home of some noble? Originally, he had expected that no matter what motive this master had, it would not be to harm him, so he had always been calm. However, at this moment, he could not help but be a little cautious. Even if the other party did not have any other motive, for such a high and mighty noble to spare no effort to get close to a small workshop worker like him, wasn't it strange? There must be a demon when things were abnormal. A demon had appeared, and it was the old witch of the Black Mountain. Yang Fan followed Lady Cayenne all the way, passing through winding corridors, courtyards, and courtyards as if they were walking in a maze. After wandering for a long time, they finally arrived at a fine house. Walking into the room, he saw a table, a cupboard, a shelf, and a screen. They were all made of superior wood such as sandalwood, phoebe, and agarwood. The design was exquisite and elegant, looking luxurious but not ordinary. The red sandalwood screen and the hollowed-out antique shelf divided the room into several parts, giving off a feeling of winding paths leading to seclusion. Yang Fan had never been to such a luxurious house. When he was in Nanyang, although his master was also a young master of a country, the layout of the houses in that small country was very casual. The nobles there did not develop a luxurious lifestyle of building mansions and wearing luxurious clothes. How could the architecture of the houses be compared to the Tang dynasty in China? He came directly to the corridor of the back house and let Cayenne lead him through the rooms and into this fine house. Until now, he had not realized that he had entered the bedroom of the owner of this house. It was not until he went around the screen and saw 2 lantern trees that he realized something was wrong. These were 2 bronze lantern trees that were half the height of a person. They were made of bronze and had flowers and leaves of various colors. There were birds of various colors standing on them. Some of the birds tilted their heads and picked their feathers. Some raised their heads and chirped, and some bowed their heads and pecked at their food. Their movements were different and lifelike. Candles were inserted on the feathers of the bronze birds, illuminating the room as if it was daytime. A slanted screen divided the room into a bedroom. In the corner of the dressing table, there was a makeup box with 3 layers of lotus flowers and a few purple boxes for storing jewelry. A bronze mirror that was as tall as a person stood beside the dressing table, reflecting his figure. Yang Fan was secretly shocked and hurriedly looked back, only to find that Lady Kai Yin had quietly retreated. An old voice laughed softly and said, "Little Lang Jun, why are you so flustered?" The voice came from behind the plum blossom screen. The screen covered most of the couch, and from Yang Fan's angle, he could not see what was on the couch. Yang Fan hesitated for a moment. At this point, he could only bite the bullet and walk over. He saw an old woman lying on the couch, looking at him with a smile. Yang Fan took a closer look. This woman was clearly an old woman, although her hair was as black as ink and her body was well maintained. The wrinkles on her face were carved by the god of time. How could they be covered up by makeup? It was just that the light filtered through the screen created a hazy effect, so at first glance she seemed to be 20 years younger. The old woman was lying on the couch, looking like a sleeping beauty. She only had a soft gauze gown draped over her body, and she seemed to be wearing nothing underneath. Yang Fan quickly looked down and did not dare to look again. He only slightly cupped his hands and said, "I am Yang Fan. Greetings, old madam. May I know why old madam has summoned me?" The old woman's smile froze. It seemed that the title old madam sounded very harsh. However, she looked at Yang Fan from head to toe. Looking at his handsome and delicate appearance, she revealed a smile that she thought was very charming and said softly, "Little Lang Jun, your health seems to be better now." Chapter 88. Hearing such a coquettish voice from an old woman's mouth, Yang Fan felt goosebumps all over his body. He bowed and said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "I presume old madam sent Miss Kai Yin to visit Junior's injuries and also invited a famous doctor to treat me. Junior and old madam have never met before, so I am truly grateful for old madam's favor." The old woman covered her mouth and chuckled. "Young Lang Jun is too polite. Sit down and talk." In the early Tang dynasty, although chairs and stools had also entered the Central Plains, they were not popular, especially in the upper class, where they were even more opposed. Although the influence of Hu was severe at this time, food, clothing, culture, and other aspects had absorbed a large amount of Hu culture. When it came to living quarters, the noble families still strictly followed the customs of the Han people. They also knew that Hu clothes and Hu furniture were more suitable. They usually liked to wear Hu clothes when they went out, but on formal occasions, they still wore deep clothes and solemn formal attire. In other words, they thought that Hu clothes were suitable, but in terms of style, they still couldn't be compared to Han clothes. On important occasions, wearing Han clothes was considered formal attire, just like how people usually wore t-shirts, jeans, or even singlets and shorts. It didn't matter, but to attend important meetings and banquets, they usually had to wear a suit and leather shoes. It was the same in terms of furniture. As furniture, they were more resistant to Hu chairs and stools. They still followed the Han style, so the furniture in the room was low and the bed was low. Therefore, there was no chair next to Yang Su, but there was a praying mat wrapped in brocade. Yang Fan lifted his robe and knelt on the praying mat. He said respectfully, "Madam, you don't have to be so polite. Please call me by my name. I'm the second in the family, so Madam can call me Beta Persei." The old woman laughed and said, "Then I I'll call you Erling. I heard about Erling's matter. I heard that the steward of the Yang residence promised a reward of 1,000,000 yuan. So Erling risked his life to rush into the fire to save him and was injured. I don't know how you've recovered now. Come here and let me see you. As she spoke, she sat up and looked at Yang Fan with a burning gaze. The thin clothes on her body faintly revealed her flesh, and as she sat up, her figure became even more obvious. Although this old woman was old, she lived like a princess, her flesh and blood were full, and her figure did not have the slightest bit of withered. Although the wrinkles on her face were obvious, her figure really seemed to be around 40 years old. How would Yang Fan dare to approach her? He merely nodded and said, "Old madam, Junior's injury has already healed." The old woman saw that he was very respectful and frowned slightly. Then she slowly lay back on the couch and rested her chin on her hand. With a languid expression, she said, "Erling, you probably don't know who I am and why I invited you here, right?" Yang Fan looked down at the shiny floor in front of him and said, "Yes." Miss Kai Yin said that old madam was a senior of the Yang family, which was why she took care of this Junior. Junior knows that Miss Kai Yin's words are mostly excuses and was just about to ask old madam why old madam is taking such care of Junior. The old woman chuckled and said, "Erling, it seems that you have completely forgotten about this old woman. Look up and take a closer look. You and I have met before." When Yang Fan heard this, he raised his head and carefully looked at the old woman. He shook his head and said, "I don't think I've seen madam before." A trace of displeasure flashed through the old woman's eyes, but she immediately laughed self-mockingly. "Haha, that's right. At that time, you had a pair of beautiful daughters of my Tang dynasty in front of you. One was as beautiful as a peony, and the other was as beautiful as a lily. How could you still remember this old woman? Erling, you and I met once by the Luo River. Do you still remember?" The Luo River? Hearing what she said, Yang Fan suddenly remembered. As soon as he thought of it, a fiery figure immediately appeared in his mind. She was wearing a red dress, and she looked like a red mermaid playfully slapping the water on the banks of the Luo River. She also looked like Luo Shinmifei coming out of the water, tender and alluring, indescribable. Soon after, another beautiful figure gradually appeared in his mind. From a graceful and hazy figure, it gradually became clear. That grace, that charm, was as slender as the moon, as gentle as water, like a pure white and elegant lily growing by the mermaid's side, swaying in the wind. It was human nature for a young man to like beautiful things. For a man, especially a young man, a beautiful woman was even more unforgettable. So when the old woman mentioned the Luo River, he immediately remembered the Luo River's flower that could melt people in flames and the nameless woman who was as gentle as spring water. Only then did he vaguely remember that there was indeed such an old woman beside this pair of beauties. Yang Fan softly made an "ah" sound and suddenly said, "That's right, this kid remembers. That day at the Luo River, I did see old madam." The old woman smiled slightly and said, "Old madam? Do you know who I really am?" This old woman had already called herself I. How could her identity not be obvious? A woman who called herself I, but was not a person of the palace, could only be a princess who had already received a title. Yang Fan thought of Princess Taiping. Since this old woman was sitting on the same bed as her, could she also be a princess? Yang Fan did not remember much about the matters of the imperial family. There were many princes and princesses in the imperial family, apart from Princess Taiping, who was in the limelight. How could he remember much? The old woman seemed to know that it was impossible for him to know who she was. Her tone only paused for a moment before she continued. "I am the 18th daughter of Emperor Gaozu of the Tang dynasty, the noble princess." Since the noble princess had already revealed her identity, Yang Fan could not continue to play dumb. Therefore, he bowed his head deeply and said in a deep voice, "I have seen your highness the princess." The noble princess laughed lightly and waved her hand. In a private examination, there is no need to stand on ceremony. If these words were said by 1,000 delicate and charming women, the screen would be like fog, the candlelight would be like the sun, the brocade robe would be like a beast's fragrance, the jade-like body would be lying on the ground. Adding this kind of flirtatious words, it would be very charming and gentle. But coming from this old woman's mouth, Yang Fan's heart turned cold. He just stopped and did not say anything. The noble princess said, "Erlang, do you know why I sent people to treat your injury, and why I sent Kaiyun to often visit and take care of you?" "I do not know," Yang Fan said. The noble princess said, "You, this young man, look smart. How can you be so blind? That day Princess Taiping wanted you to go to her mansion to practice polo. Such an opportunity, why did you not agree?" "If I agreed," Yang Fan said, "even though I am Princess Taiping's disciple, I will only be a servant to be ordered around. Playing polo! Receiving the princess favor, I can be rich and powerful for a while, but how can it be a long-term plan? Therefore, I would rather be a free commoner on the streets than enter a rich and powerful family and become a servant." The noble princess said, "How do you know that entering Taiping's school means becoming a servant? Do you know that there are many high-ranking officials in the imperial court, even the current prime minister, who were recommended by Taiping to be put in an important position by the empress? If you can enter Taiping's discerning eyes, how do you know that you will not have a chance to become famous?" Yang Fan smiled indifferently and said, "Those officials, even the high-ranking ministers who have become the Xianggong, have their own talent and learning to stabilize the country and bring peace to the country. The princess's recommendation is only to let the empress know of their talent. I am only a commoner on the streets, ignorant and incompetent. Even if I can play polo very well, what future can I have?" The noble princess saw that the two of them had been talking in circles. If this layer of window paper was not pierced through, in the end they would not be able to talk any further. She had no choice but to get straight to the point and speak her true intention. This noble princess was Li Shimin's half-sister, the 18th of the 19 daughters of the founding emperor of the Tang dynasty, Li Yuan. She was Princess Taiping's grand-aunt, one generation older than Wu Zetian. When Wu Zetian wantonly massacred Li Tang's imperial family, some of the princesses resisted with all their might. Some swallowed their anger, but very few of them bowed and bent their knees to curry favor with Empress Wu. Only this noble princess was different. In order to curry favor with Empress Wu, it could be said that she was unscrupulous. A few days ago, Yang Fan saw Feng Xiaobao selling medicine on the street. It was this noble princess who presented him to Wu Zetian. When this Feng Xiaobao was selling medicine on the street, he first flirted with a maid in the noble princess's residence. This maid was Kaiyun. The two of them had a passionate affair. Kaiyun even secretly brought him into the noble princess's residence to be lovey-dovey. In the end, they were reported to the noble princess and were caught red-handed by her. The noble princess originally wanted to punish the two of them severely, but when she saw that Feng Xiaobao was strong and handsome, she couldn't help but fall in love with him. In the end, after catching the adulterer, this noble princess turned Feng Xiaobao into her guest. When Wu Zetian was overbearing towards Li Tang's imperial family, the noble princess was worried that she would also be purged by Empress Wu. So she spent a lot of money to bribe the maids by Empress Wu's side to inquire about Empress Wu's news. When she found out that Empress Wu was gradually yearning for love, she offered her gigolo, Feng Xiaobao, to Wu Zetian. Because of this great merit, Wu Zetian doted on the noble princess and became the Empress Dowager's favorite person. In the past few years, the princes and princesses of Li Tang's imperial family were constantly suffering, but the noble princess remained unmoved. The noble princess tasted the sweetness, because she saw that Princess Taiping seemed to have a good impression of Yang Fan. She hardened her heart and wanted to imitate Wu Zetian as a gigolo. She also wanted to make Princess Taiping a gigolo. If she could please both mother and daughter, Her position as the noble princess would be as stable as Mount Tai. It must be said that this Princess Taiping was very dignified compared to many of the Tang dynasty's princesses, who were dissolute and had illicit affairs. Princess Taiping married Xue Xiao at the age of 16. The two of them were husband and wife for 7 years. From beginning to end, they were deeply in love and never had any scandals. However, last year, Xue Xiao was murdered for treason. Last year, when the Prince of Yu, Li Zhan, rebelled against Wu, the prince's son-in-law, Xue Xiao's 2 elder brothers were also involved. Li Zhan's rebellion failed. Xue Xiao's 2 elder brothers, Xue Liang and Xue Su, were beheaded. Originally, Xue Xiao did not participate in this matter, but he was also imprisoned. It was only because he was Princess Taiping's husband that the Empress Dowager showed mercy and did not behead him. She ordered him to leave his corpse intact. As a result, this prince's son-in-law was starved to death in prison. Princess Taiping was currently a widow. Her mood was very gloomy. This noble princess, who had obtained a great benefit from being a pimp for the Empress Dowager, wanted to act as a matchmaker for Yang Fan. She wanted to recommend him to be the man of the Tang dynasty's princesses, the flower of Luoyang Li Lingyue. The noble princess sweetly said, "I want to introduce you to be Taiping's guest. I wonder what Lang Jun thinks." Chapter 89. Yang Fan was stunned. He had always wanted to know who Miss Kai Yan's master was, and what was the purpose of him taking care of him. However, no matter how rich his imagination was, no matter how imaginative he was, he would never have thought that it was to introduce him to be a gigolo, to be the gigolo of Princess Taiping Li Lingyue. Li Lingyue's face was like a flower, charming and lovely. She had been in love with Xue Xiao for 7 years and had never done anything lewd. It could be seen that she was not a loose woman. Once such a woman truly liked a man, she would definitely have feelings for him, even if she couldn't give him the status of a prince consort. Just like how Empress Wu treated Xue Huai, she was very fond of him. Even though Wu Zetian had gradually entered the role of an emperor and was no longer satisfied with spoiling only one person, her favor and preferential treatment towards Xue Huai had never decreased. Moreover, if he could be loved by the young and affectionate Princess Taiping, he would definitely be in love, and glory, splendor, wealth, and rank would be just around the corner. In particular, Princess Taiping was different from her mother. Princess Taiping was only 24 years old, and even if she didn't have the power and wealth that came with it, she was the object of countless men's desire with just her charming appearance. In addition to her unattainable status, it added to her charm. Just think about it, which man could resist such temptation? Therefore, the noble princess said it calmly, without the slightest consideration that Yang Fan would refuse. Money, beauty, power, everything was at his fingertips. How could he not agree to a fugitive who would charge into a fire for a reward of 1,000,000 yuan? Looking at Yang Fan's startled expression, the Princess of Jin thought that he was in a daze of joy. She could not help smiling and saying, "Erlang need not worry. That day Taiping was very concerned about you. Bengong took a good look at you. Looking at you carefully, you really have some of Prince Consort Xue's charm. Although your appearance isn't similar, your charm is 70 to 80% the same. No wonder that girl Lingyue saw you." The noble princess smiled and said, "However, if you are in front of Taiping, you can't act as casually as you do in the marketplace. You can't behave in such a vulgar and rude manner. I have summoned you here to teach you some of the rules of a noble's residence. In the meantime," the noble princess glanced at Yang Fan, and her eyes were filled with love. "Although you are handsome and charming, you are still young. Looking at you, I am afraid that you have not experienced the affairs between a man and a woman. If you want to win Taiping's favor, just having good appearance is not enough." As the noble princess spoke, she moved closer to the couch and said with a smile, "Erlang, you don't have to go back tonight. Stay in my mansion for a few days. When you are able to pass my test, I will send you to see Taiping." "Hee hee, other than her own husband. Taiping has never had any other man. As long as you learn the skill of seducing and pleasing women, you will definitely be able to please her. At first, when Yang Fan heard what she said, he thought of the beautiful, mermaid-like figure and indeed had some thoughts. But this was a man's natural reaction to a beautiful woman. From the start, he had never thought of becoming a gigolo like Lu Jun Fan, a plaything under the knees of a noble lady. At this time, he saw the noble princess's coy attitude. As an old woman in her 60s, she actually wanted to invite him, a young man who had not even reached the age of 20, onto the couch. He couldn't help but feel disgusted. Yang Fan straightened his back and said solemnly, "Princess has good intentions, but Yang Fan has Yang Fan's rules as a person. Yang Fan is a dignified man and has never thought of being under a woman's crotch, asking for her favor in order to seek wealth and glory. Please forgive Yang Fan for not daring to accept the princess's good intentions. Goodbye." As soon as Yang Fan finished speaking, he stood up and left. The noble princess's smile immediately froze on her face. She had never thought that a mere worker like Yang Fan would have such ambition. He actually rejected the temptation of having everything just by nodding his head. It was too unexpected that she stood there, unable to react for a moment. It was not until Yang Fan turned around the folding screen that the noble princess came back to her senses. She angrily shouted, "Stop!" Yang Fan slightly stopped, slightly turned around, and asked in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing, "What advice does your highness have?" The noble princess sat up in shock and anger. Her mind was racing, and she suddenly realized something. She couldn't help but feel embarrassed and annoyed. This kind of temptation, no one should have rejected it, not to mention a small worker like him who dared to risk his life for 1,000,000 taels of silver. Even those officials who studied poetry and books since childhood, who considered themselves disciples of the saints, many of them hoped to gain Empress Wu's favor and rise to the heavens in one step. In the end, this Yang Fan was still a young man. Unexpectedly, he thought she was too old and did not want to have an illicit relationship with her. The noble princess thought of the reason Yang Fan refused her. She was ashamed and annoyed. But although she saw that this Yang Fan was young and handsome, very pleasant, and had the intention to make him her husband, her main purpose was still to establish a good relationship with Princess Taiping. Princess Taiping quite admired this young man, as long as she acted as a go-between and taught this young man some skills to flatter women, creating several opportunities for him and Taiping. They would definitely be able to achieve something good. When the time came, she was not afraid that Taiping would not accept her favor. Thinking of this, the noble princess endured her embarrassment and said, "You, this young man, really don't know what's good for you. If Ben Gong wanted a man, would there be no need to worry about not having a guest? Ben Gong has good intentions, wanting to teach you a lesson so that Taiping won't like you, but you dislike Ben Gong for being old. Since it's like this, then call Kai Yun to serve you. You should learn more skills in bed from her. A man can't be liked by a woman just because he is born with a good appearance." Kai Yun actually did not go far, waiting behind a few folding screens. Hearing the noble princess instructions, she could not help but be pleasantly surprised. She had been drooling over a handsome young man like Yang Fan for a long time. This Miss Kai Yun also liked handsome men, otherwise she would not have hooked up with Feng Xiaobao, who sold wild herbs on the street. However, this Yang Fan was the person that the noble princess fancied first, so she did not dare to steal her master's favorite food. Who would have thought that after going around in circles, in the end, this good task still fell on her? Kai Yin was bursting with joy, but then she heard Yang Fan sneer and say, "Your Highness is right. A man can't win a woman's heart just by relying on a good appearance. As a man in this world, appearance is secondary. Talent is even more important. And the most important thing is a man's character. Mang Ke once said, 'Riches and honor cannot be corrupted, poverty cannot be shaken, and might cannot be subdued.' This is what it means to be a man." Although Yong Fan is a common man, if he bent his waist and bowed his head to serve a woman, even if he had a beauty in his arms, power in his hands, and riches on his body, he would not be happy. I disdain to be a dregs of medicine with others. As soon as these powerful words were spoken, Yong Fan immediately left with his head held high, causing the noble princess's face to turn pale with anger. Speaking of this dregs of medicine, it originated from a common joke. It was about an emperor in ancient times who saw his concubines with worried expressions and poor skin color. So he urgently called for an imperial doctor. The imperial doctor wrote a prescription, 8 strong men. A few days later, the emperor came out of the circuit palace and was overjoyed to see his concubines glowing. Suddenly, he saw 8 skinny men coming out in a line. He asked in surprise, "Who are you?" The imperial doctor replied, "Dregs of medicine." This joke was very widespread among the people. Even the people of the upper class knew about it. Of course, the noble princess had heard of this joke. Now that Yong Fan was using it to mock her, she was so angry that 1 Buddha was born and 2 Buddhas ascended to heaven. Seeing this scene, Kai Yin couldn't help but feel somewhat anxious. Only when she heard Yong Fan's footsteps getting further and further away did she gather her courage to enter the bedroom. The noble princess sat on the couch, her chest heaving up and down violently. Her old face was already swollen and purple. Miss Kai Yin timidly said, "Princess?" The noble princess's body moved slightly and a fierce look flashed across her eyes. She said in a deep voice, "Go, kill him for me." Kai Yun was startled and said hesitantly, "Princess, killing someone for no reason, I'm afraid." The noble princess sneered and said, "How can it be counted as no reason? This little thief entered this princess's mansion at night to steal property. Why can't he be killed on the spot by the mansion's servants? Go." Kai Yun's body trembled and she hurriedly complied. She turned around and rushed out to arrange the guards. When Yong Fan came out of the noble princess's bedroom, the sky had already darkened. The palace lanterns in the halls and corridors were all lit. Yong Fan originally wanted to find a servant in the princess's mansion to take him away, but he saw that the corridor was deserted and there wasn't a single person there. The imperial princesses followed the example of their superiors and subordinates. Although they often took their favored gigolos out to play and hunt, to the extent that everyone knew about it, it was no longer a secret. But at home, they still had to take care of their face. For example, this noble princess had a house full of children and grandchildren. How could she be so dissolute in public? Therefore, many servants were sent away. Yong Fan saw that there was no one around, and it was already late. If he stayed any longer, the workshop door would close, so he walked out along the path he came from. The sky, which was already gloomy because of the continuous autumn rain, became even gloomier because night was approaching. Clouds gathered in all directions, and both sides of the corridor were covered with curtains of rain. On one side of the corridor, there was a pond with a 9-zigzag bridge. The small bridge led to an exquisite and elegant 3-story building by the side of the pond. Looking out from the small building, one could see a pool of water with half a pool of dilapidated lotuses. The rainwater splashed on the lotus leaves and fell into the pool. It was so shallow that the raindrops were blooming and then extinguished. The dilapidated lotuses were swaying gently, looking very beautiful. On the top floor of the small building, the double-pushed window lattice was wide open. A middle-aged scribe in a snow-white robe was sitting in front of the window with a zither in front of him. The furnishings in the room were very simple, but a table, a pavilion, and a pillar were all ancient. On the snow-white wall hung a few freehand landscape paintings. Not far away, there was a red clay stove. The charcoal fire in the stove was burning brightly. A rough and classical pottery pot was placed on the small clay stove. The water was already boiling. Next to the stove was a small square table. On it was a tea set, tea leaves, and all kinds of seasonings that needed to be added. A beautiful girl dressed in an elegant light green lotus leaf robe was fetching water to make tea. This girl was Tin Eno. Chapter 90. At this time, there were very few people who drank tea. Other than the people of Shu, there were only eminent monks and a few noble families. At this time, although the tea needed to be seasoned with onion, ginger, pepper, jujube, mint, and other seasonings, there was already a tea ceremony. Tin Eno warmed the pot, washed the utensils, poured the tea, and added all kinds of seasonings. He did it elegantly and freely, with an elegant sense of beauty and rhythm. She picked up the pot and divided the tea. Then she held the porcelain cup with both hands and gently brought it to the white-robed gentleman. Her watery eyes casually glanced outside. With just a glance, she happened to see Yang Fan walking down the corridor. Tin Eno let out a soft cry. Her hands trembled slightly, and the tea spilled over, and her fingers were scalded. "Why are you so careless?" The white-robed scribes seemed to be very intoxicated with this rainy autumn scene. He was leisurely looking at the eaves of the pavilions in the distance in the rain, and his fingers were playing on the strings of the zither as if he was preparing a song. Suddenly he heard Tin Eno's soft cry. He withdrew his gaze and glanced at her, asking warmly, "It was your servant's carelessness. Oh, young master, who is that young man in the corridor? He doesn't look like someone from the princess's residence, from his clothes." Tin Eno softly explained and quickly changed the topic. The white-robed scribes glanced down the corridor and lightly said, "That is a man that the princess likes. It seems that she has given her gigolo to Wu Mei and tasted the sweetness." When the white-robed gentleman spoke of the princess, his face was indifferent. When he mentioned the empress of the court, he even directly called her by her name. From his words, it could be seen that he was extremely disdainful of women playing with gigolo. However, he did not even show his disdain in his expression and tone. Although it was only a light sentence, that kind of true arrogance arose spontaneously. In the distance, under the vast sky, there stood a very tall building. That was the heaven. In the heavens, there was a great Buddha. The great Buddha overlooked Luoyang City from high above. His gaze was so benevolent, and he had a tranquil expression on his face. Was it because all things were equal, or was it because in his eyes all things were insignificant and not worth his attention? When the white-robed man looked out of the window, no matter if he was talking about the princess or Wu Zetian, he was always calm and at ease. He was like the great Buddha in the rain in the distance. He was calm and natural. He didn't show any respect or disgust, as if there was nothing in this world that was worthy of him being moved. In fact, the appearance of this white-robed man was nothing special. He had ordinary eyebrows, ordinary eyes, and ordinary facial features. However, whether it was his hair, his eyebrows, or the beard above and below his lips, they all gave people a feeling of tidiness and immaculate. Even his collar and robe were immaculate. This could only be achieved by carefully grooming and grooming people. As a result, this ordinary-looking man had a gentle temperament. The gigolo of the princess? Tin Eno seemed to be in disbelief, and his face showed a slight surprise. The white-robed gentleman smiled indifferently and said, "It's just the princess's plan. She wants to present this young man to Princess Taiping." Strange. What's so special about this young man? How can she be sure that such a young man will be favored by Princess Taiping? Yang Fan was walking in the corridor under the rain. He was not even 20 years old. He was tall and handsome. There was a kind of spirit between his eyebrows. However, just like a woman's charm, it needed to be brewed and precipitated over the years to ferment into an intoxicating taste. A man's temperament, it also needed the cultivation of life experience and inner cultivation to be emitted. The young Yang Fan was like a strong bamboo growing vigorously in the rain, or a small pine standing on the cliff. In the eyes of the white-robed gentleman who was used to seeing the world, he looked especially immature. Naturally, he didn't find it strange, not to mention that he had always been arrogant. The man in white muttered to himself. He then smiled and said, "However, It seems that this young man has rejected her. Otherwise, this young man would not be walking here alone. He would be in her bedroom. The white-robed gentleman's voice stopped abruptly. It seemed that what he said next would tarnish his purity. Hearing this, Tin Aino's slightly knitted eyebrows suddenly relaxed. She suddenly understood and felt a little relieved. Then, she turned her bright eyes and saw a strange scene. This small building was 3 stories high and was the tallest building in the princess residence. She looked down from above and could clearly see everything in the courtyard. She saw more than a dozen guards of the princess residence rushing over and stopping behind a rockery. They were all holding sharp blades in their hands. A maidservant in green seemed to be saying something to them, and then they ran towards the long corridor. Looking at the movement, Tin Aino's pretty face tightened, and she said involuntarily, "Are they going to kill people?" The white-robed gentleman glanced outside and said lightly, "They are ashamed into anger and worried that others will leak the secret. Is it strange to kill people to keep their mouths shut?" Tin Aino's pair of pink fists suddenly clenched tightly. She lifted her buttocks and was about to stand up. However, when she saw the child sitting quietly in front of her, her shoulders seemed to be pressed by a mountain. She couldn't help but sit down again. She looked out of the window anxiously. The guards with swords had reached the end of the corridor and were running along it. Tin Aino was even more anxious. Yang Fan was just a shopkeeper. He might be able to survive street fights and ruffians, but how could he be a match for the warriors of the princess mansion? Tin Aino glanced at the white-robed gentleman in front of her and plucked up her courage to say, "Child, please save his life." The white-robed gentleman sat steadily like a cloud in the sky. He said lightly, "There is life and death in the world. Can you save all of them?" Tin Aino gritted her teeth and replied, "But he is different." The white-robed gentleman slightly raised his eyebrows and asked, "What's different about him?" Tin Aino replied, "He saved Anu's life." The child showed a slightly surprised look and suddenly said, "Oh, this young man is the one who saved your life?" Tin Aino bowed her head and said, "Yes." The white-robed gentleman didn't say anything. He just gently picked up the teacup. Tin Aino gritted her teeth and said, "Child said that one should repay kindness." The white-robed gentleman's white porcelain teacup just touched his lips and stopped in the air. He paused for a moment and said, "Go." Tin Aino was overjoyed. She nodded and said yes. At this moment, the guards were getting closer and closer. When the Tian Ai Nu saw this, she did not dare to go downstairs. She immediately pushed open another window and leaped out. As she leaped through the air, she stretched out her hand and plucked an object from the wall. She was like a swallow soaring through the clouds. She landed on the 9 Bends Bridge over the pond. She stepped on the stone beast at the bridge and flew forward. "Stop, bold thief! How dare you steal from the princess's mansion?" Before the pursuers arrived, Yang Fan heard the sound of footsteps. He stopped in his tracks and turned around, only to see more than a dozen warriors rushing over with swords in their hands. Before he could ask them anything, he heard their shouts. How could he be stupid enough to think that they mistook him for a thief? This was clearly the noble princess who had flown into a rage out of humiliation and wanted to kill him to silence him. What should I do? If I don't fight back, I will be killed. If I fight back, I will inevitably expose my kung fu. If it was under normal circumstances, it wouldn't be a big problem to expose my high level of martial arts. In the wilderness, there are many dragons and snakes, and there are many hidden experts. However, Dr. Yang's family has just been attacked by an assassin. At that time, I was working in the Yang mansion and was injured. If I expose my martial arts, my identity will definitely be exposed. If I want to stay in the capital and continue to pursue the killer, it will take more effort. These thoughts only flashed in Yang Fan's mind. In fact, he did not need to think too much. He also knew that no matter what, he must fight back. Yang Fan slightly exerted force on his feet. Before he could attack, a light green figure suddenly appeared. A low and dignified woman's voice said, "Stop! All of you, stand down." Yang Fan suddenly looked up. He saw a woman in green standing firmly on the rock garden outside the corridor. She was wearing a waist-length dress with small sleeves and embroidered plum flowers. Her waist was slender and she looked very young. But her appearance could not be seen because she was wearing a revealing hat on her head. The gauze curtain hung low, revealing only a little bit of her sharp chin. The guards of the princess's mansion obviously recognized this woman. When they saw her appear, they were surprised and stopped. One of them, who seemed to be the leader, said respectfully, "Miss, we are serving." Teneno interrupted, "I know. You all go back. With the princess, my young master will talk to you." The young master she was talking about obviously had a lot of weight in the princess's mansion. The guards looked at each other. After a slight hesitation, they actually put away their weapons and retreated. Teneno was proficient in vocal skills. At this time, he changed his accent. Yang Fan could not recognize him at all. Teneno saw that he was looking at him with surprise and curiosity. He was afraid that he would see through his identity. When he saw the guards retreating, he immediately jumped up. His light green figure rushed into the flowers and trees. After a few flashes, he disappeared. Yang Fan stood at the same place. He saw that those people came like a tide and then retreated like a tide. From the beginning to the end, he was completely thrown to the side. It was as if his life and death were completely out of his control. Who is this woman wearing the revealing hat? Yang Fan carefully thought about the woman's voice that only said 2 sentences. The voice was low and serious. He had never heard it before. Yang Fan's heart was full of doubts. But he also knew that this was not a place to stay for long, so he had no time to think more. Seeing that the guards retreated, he also quickened his pace and walked out. When Teneno returned to the small building, he took off the revealing hat and hung it back on the wall. He knelt down again and bowed to the man in white. "Thank you for your help." The man in white was drinking a cup. After hearing this, he just said lightly without turning his head, "Only this time. Don't do it again." Teneno said, "Yes." The man in white put down the teacup and looked at the misty sky. He murmured, "It's autumn. Shinmu should be arriving in Luojing soon." Chapter 91. At Yang Fan's house, Jiang Sining uneasily pushed open the door. He tiptoed and poked his head out to take a look. Then he turned back and clutched his wrist. He frowned and said, "The workshop is about to close. Why hasn't Xiao Fan come back yet? Did something happen?" Ma Qiao was lying on Yang Fan's couch with his hands as a pillow and his legs crossed. He was humming a tuneless little song, and his whole body was in a mess. When he heard Jiang Sining's words, he said indifferently, "Hey, he's a big man. Are you worried that someone will rape him? As for money, does he have 10 copper coins on him? Don't worry." Jiang Sining rolled his eyes at him. "Look at you. You're his brother. Don't you know how to worry? Go outside and look for him." Ma Qiao said, "Don't worry. He's not a kid. He's a big man. What's there to be afraid of? Where do you want me to find him? What if I take the wrong path and he comes back? Fine. I'll be stuck outside. I'll have to find a corner and stay there for the night. Don't you feel bad?" Jiang Sining spat at him, then sat down on the edge of the couch and mumbled, "You're not loved by your grandmother and uncle. Who cares about you?" Ma Qiao laughed. He ordered like a boss, "Hey, Xiaoning, bring me an egg. I'm hungry." Jiang Sining said, "That's for Xiao Fan. You're as strong as a bull. If you want to eat, go back to your own home." Ma Qiao snorted, "Stingy." He continued to shake his body. Suddenly he stopped. He seemed to remember something. He excitedly got up and sat shoulder to shoulder with Jiang Sining. He touched her shoulder and said, "Hey, Xiaoning, do you remember when you took me to your house to steal a chicken?" Jiang Sining looked at the door absent-mindedly. "That was a long time ago. Who remembers?" Ma Qiao said, "Have you forgotten? At that time, there was a big jujube tree in your yard. but it didn't bear many fruits. The branches of the jujube tree stretched over the wall. You wanted to eat the chicken, but your family had to save up the chicken to sell, so you didn't get any. You urged me to go. I stepped on your shoulders and climbed up the wall, then slid down the tree to the chicken coop. I took the chicken and left. For several days, your mother kept muttering that the old hen at home didn't lay any eggs. Jiang Sining was reminded of something interesting in his childhood. He couldn't help but burst into laughter and said, "There was one time when you had just slid down the tree. Before you could steal an egg, my dad came out of the house. When he saw you stealing an egg, he took off his shoes and spanked you. It was a miserable spanking." Ma Chiao said, "That's right. We are loyal, aren't we? I was beaten so badly by your father, but I didn't tell you. Later, your father even brought me back to complain to my mother. I didn't say anything in front of him. After he left, I told my mother the truth." Jiang Sining glanced at him with a smile and said, "You are loyal." Ma Chiao snorted again and said, "You said the same thing at that time. Do you still remember how you comforted me?" Jiang Sining thought for a moment and suddenly blushed. He shook his head and said, "I don't remember." Ma Chiao snorted and said, "I remember it clearly. I was lying on the grass and took off my pants. My butt was swollen. You used your small hands to rub it for me. Rub it! It was so comfortable." The more Ma Chiao said, the more beautiful it was. Jiang Sining's face became redder and redder. It was even redder than the red-skinned eggs in the basket. "What nonsense are you talking about? It was comfortable, right? Come. Let me continue to make you comfortable." Jiang Sining blushed and pinched him. Ma Chiao cried out and dodged. The two of them were fooling around when the door creaked and Yang Fan walked in. "Xiao Fan, you are back." Jiang Sining got up from the bed and tidied up her messy hair. Her face was still red from laughing. She went up to him and said, "Where did you go? You came back so late. I was worried to death." Yang Fan laughed and said, "Sister Ning, I am a man. What can happen to me? I just wandered far away. When I remembered to come back, it was already late." Ma Chiao also got up and went up to him. He said, "See, I said it would be fine. He is not a delicate girl. Even if he was lost for a night, he would still come back in one piece. What are you worried about? If you were lost, we would really be busy." Jiang Sining said, "A dog's mouth can't spit ivory. Even if you lost him, I won't lose him." The three of them laughed and talked for a while. Because it was already late, Jiang Sining was relieved to see that Yang Fan had returned. He said goodbye and went home first. After Jiang Sining left, Ma Chiao immediately asked, "What happened?" Yang Fan glanced at him and said, "How did you know something happened to me?" Ma Chiao said, "You can scare Xiaoning, but you can't scare me. You don't know anyone in Luoyang. Besides, you don't like to go shopping. It has been raining for half a day, and it is still raining. Did you go shopping? Who are you trying to fool? Tell me what happened." Yang Fan sighed and said, "Something did happen, but it is not something dangerous. You don't have to worry." As Yang Fan spoke, he told Ma Chiao everything that had happened. Of course, he only said that the other party was a noblewoman and did not point out that the other party was a princess. He also did not mention that the princess had flown into a rage out of humiliation and tried to silence the other party, but was stopped by a mysterious woman. Even so, Ma Chiao was stunned and murmured, "Something like that happened? Something so good?" He looked up and down at Yang Fan and said, unconvinced, "You look like a girl. What's so good about you? Why did they take a liking to you, but not to me?" Yang Fan said with a smile, "If you like, I can tell you which house it is. You might as well go to their door and wander around. Maybe you will catch the eye of that noblewoman." Ma Chiao's eyes lit up and he hurriedly asked, "That noblewoman, is she beautiful?" Yang Fan suddenly thought of the mermaid on the banks of the Luo River and said with a smile, "She is 20 years old and beautiful." Ma Chiao's mouth watered. He rubbed his hands together and suddenly stopped. He thought about it carefully and shook his head, saying, "No way. I am 100 times more willing to be the man of such a woman. But as a gigolo, she is a fairy. I will not do it. I, Ma Chiao, still want to be a man with my back straight. Yang Fan teased him. Isn't it just sleeping with her? What's the difference? Ma Chiao said, What are you talking about? There is a big difference. But I can't say. In any case, there is a difference. Yang Fan said happily, This is my brother. If you disregard your dignity and throw yourself at someone when you hear that they are rich and beautiful, I will look down on you. Ma Chiao said proudly, Of course. Although I, Ma Chiao, am not a great person, I am still a man of indomitable spirit. Yang Fan restrained a smile and said solemnly, However, you can't tell anyone about this. Don't tell your mother either. Once it gets out, it will ruin her reputation. I'm afraid little brother will also suffer. Ma Chiao said, You can rest assured. Last time, I thought you were going to stay with Miss A New Forever. I thought I couldn't hide it even if I wanted to. I am afraid if I didn't say it at that time, Mother would be angry with me when she found out later. But this matter is different. Don't think that I am usually careless. I know what I can say and what I can't say, what is light and what is heavy. When he said this, his eyes suddenly sank, as if there was something related. Yang Fan did not notice the strange look in his eyes. The two of them talked for a while. Ma Chiao could not suppress his curiosity and asked Yang Fan about what happened after he was led into the mansion. Yang Fan said some nonsense. The mansion was still the same mansion, but the hostess had automatically become the flower of Luoyang, Li Lingyue. Some of the stories were charming, and some were amazing. From the beginning to the end, the whole story was like the story of a beautiful fox fairy who invited a young scholar into her house to rest for the night. It fully satisfied Ma Chiao's curiosity, and he returned with satisfaction. After seeing Ma Chiao off, Yang Fan thought about the absurdity of this matter and felt it was slightly funny in his heart. However, when he thought of Princess Taiping's beautiful appearance and how he was only a step away from the bed of this noble and beautiful woman, he couldn't help but feel a little restless. There really weren't many young men who could resist the aura of a mature and beautiful young woman. After a long while, Yang Fan collected his thoughts and went to the kitchen to look around. Jiang Sining had already prepared food for him, and it was still warm. Yang Fan ate a little, washed up, and returned to the bed to lie down. He no longer thought about this romantic encounter that ended without cause, and turned to think about his next move. In fact, he had been thinking about this matter on the way back from Diliu. If Miss Kai Yin had not led him to the Princess Taiping's mansion, perhaps he would have made a decision by now. From the information obtained from Di Liu, this Miaoshinka was most likely dead. Even if he was still alive, he was already under control. As a former confidant of Wu Zetian, the hidden minister of the Tang dynasty, it was reasonable that Shanghai Wan the hidden minister, was now monitoring him. But in this case, it would be very difficult for him to find Miaoshinka. Yang Fan did not have the confidence that he could enter the imperial palace as if it was a deserted place. Originally, he felt that it would be very difficult for Qiu Shinji as great General Zhu Jinwu to enter the imperial army camp and come into contact with this great General Qiu. So he wanted to first investigate the whereabouts of Miaoshinka. But now Miaoshinka's whereabouts were a mystery, and the only person who knew his whereabouts was deep in the imperial palace, so it was more difficult to find him than Qiu Shinji. So, everything returned to the starting point, and his target once again fell on Qiu Shinji. This was different from when his master, Zhang Kuo, forced his way into the governor's office of Guangzhou. That was a yamen, but this was a real military camp, and a camp of the imperial army elites. Even his master, Zhang Kuo, forced his way into the governor's office and took the head of the military governor Zhang Kuo of a circuit, then immediately left, not fighting with a large number of soldiers who rushed over. Yang Fan's martial arts were far inferior to his master's, and was also inferior to his senior apprentice, brother Zhang Shaowei. So it was impossible to force his way in. As such, he had to sneak in. The left guards of Jin was stationed in Mengjin, and although it was not far from Luoyang, it would be difficult to return on the same day to do such a big thing. He had no family or care in Luoyang, so what reason could he find to not arouse suspicion if he did not return at night? Yang Fan suddenly thought of Su Fangzhen and the Princess of Jin. These two pretenses seemed to be useful,